Hi, guys. Tonight, we begin a journey into the soft, gray light of a world waking up to a new destiny. We are traveling back to the early 19th century, to the year 1837. A time when the world moved at the pace of a horse's gallop and the flickering glow of a beeswax candle. Before we step into the mist of old London and walk the quiet halls of Kensington Palace, I want to share with you the path we are about to take. Over the next 3 hours, we will explore the long, 63-year reign of Queen Victoria, not as a list of dry dates and battles, but as a deeply human story of growth, love, and legacy. In this long journey, we will start with the silent, guarded years of her childhood at Kensington, where she lived under a strict system of isolation. We will witness the sudden, early morning moment she became queen at just 18. We will follow her into the grand ballrooms where she met her cousin, Prince Albert, and watch as their intellectual partnership transformed the British monarchy into a symbol of progress. We will travel to their private sanctuaries, like Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, and stand among the glass and iron of the Great Exhibition. And eventually, we will walk through the long night of her mourning, seeing how she became the grandmother of Europe, until she was finally reunited with her beloved Albert in the silence of Windsor. This is a complete history of an era, designed to bring you peace and restorative rest. Before we begin, I would love it if you just take a moment to subscribe to this channel and give this video a like. It really helps these stories reach those who need a bit of quiet in their busy lives. And I'm always curious. Where are you right now? Is it late at night where you are, or perhaps the very beginning of your day? Let me know in the comments. I read them all, and they mean a lot to me. Now, settle in. Let the weight of the world fall away, and let's talk about the dawn of the Victorian age. Imagine, if you will, a heavy, silver mist clinging to the surface of the River Thames. It is the early hours of June 20th, 1837. And London is still held in the deep, rhythmic breathing of sleep. The cobblestone streets are damp, reflecting the pale, pre-dawn sky, and the only sound is the occasional, distant cry of a night watchman, or the soft ripple of water against the wooden piers. Far from the bustling docks, nestled within the dark, leafy embrace of Kensington, stands a palace of red brick and quiet shadows. Kensington Palace. Inside, the air is still. It smells of old wood, lavender, and the faint, lingering scent of extinguished lamps. The long corridors are silent, their floors covered in thick carpets that swallow the sound of any footfall. In a small, modest bedroom on the second floor, a young woman is sleeping. Her name is Alexandrina Victoria. She is only 18 years old. To the world outside, she is a princess, but in this room, in the softness of her dreams, she is simply a girl, protected by the heavy silk curtains of her bed. She does not know, as she breathes in the cool night air, that the world she woke up to yesterday is gone forever. She does not know that miles away, at Windsor Castle, the old king, King William IV, has just drawn his final breath. The crown is now searching for a new head to rest upon, and it is heading toward this very room. Think about that moment of transition. It is one of the most famous moments in history, yet it was entirely silent. There were no cameras, no news flashes, just the quiet movement of a carriage through the mist. For Victoria, this transition was not just about power. It was about escape. For 18 years, her life had been a series of rules. She was never allowed to walk down the stairs without holding someone's hand. She was never allowed to sleep in a room by herself. Her world was small, measured in lessons, piano practice, and the quiet company of her dolls. This was the Kensington system, a system we will explore in detail very soon. But outside, the world is changing. The Industrial Revolution is beginning to hum in the distance, steam engines are starting to breathe fire into the landscape, and the British Empire is stretching its limbs across the oceans. Yet here, in this room, time feels frozen. Listen to the silence of the palace. It is a heavy, expectant silence. Suddenly, the stillness is broken. The distant sound of a carriage, the rhythmic clatter of hooves on the gravel drive, growing louder, then stopping abruptly. Two men have arrived. The Archbishop of Canterbury and the Lord Chamberlain. They have come from the deathbed of a king to the bedside of a queen. Their boots click sharply on the stone steps, a sound that feels almost violent in the hushed sanctity of the dawn. They knock, a firm, echoing sound against the heavy oak doors. Inside, the servants stir. A candle is lit. Then another. Yellow light begins to spill into the dark hallways, casting long, dancing shadows against the portraits of ancestors who once wore the same heavy burden. Victoria is woken by her mother. She wraps herself in a simple cotton dressing gown, her hair loose, her eyes still heavy with the remnants of sleep. She walks down the stairs, alone, for the first time in her life. No one is holding her hand. The wooden steps are cool beneath her bare feet. This is the first step of her reign, and the first step of her freedom. In the drawing room, the two men are waiting. They kneel. They do not see a tired teenager in a nightgown, they see a sovereign. The words are spoken softly. The king is dead. Long live the queen. Think of the weight of that sentence. It is the sound of a door closing on childhood, and a gate opening to an empire that will eventually cover a quarter of the globe. Victoria stands there, small, composed, and remarkably calm. The sun is just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and soft gold. This is the dawn of the Victorian era. But it doesn't feel like a revolution yet. It feels like a quiet promise. It feels like the beginning of a long, steady, and beautiful story. As the city of London begins to wake, as the first coal fires are lit in the hearths of the poor and the rich alike, the young queen asks for one thing. One simple request that marks her new life. She asks for 1 hour, just 1 hour, to be entirely alone. Over the next 3 hours, we will walk beside her through every year that follows. We will see the world through her eyes, and through the eyes of the man who would eventually become her soul's compass. Prince Albert. We will explore the grand ballrooms, the silent studies, and the private heart of a woman who shaped a century. But for now, just stay here, in the quiet dawn, where the mist is still thick, and the future is just a soft, golden light on the horizon. Take a deep breath. Feel the support of your bed, as steady and reliable as the history we are about to unfold. Let the rhythmic sound of the distant carriage hoofs in your imagination lead you into a state of deep, historical calm. The stage is set. The players are ready. And the era of Victoria has begun. You are safe. You are at rest. The long journey is ahead of us, but for tonight, we start in the silence. Now that the crown has been placed, and the first dawn of her reign has broken over the palace, we must pause. To truly understand the queen who would rule for over 60 years, we must understand the girl who was raised in the silence of Kensington Palace. This was not a childhood of grand adventures, but one of strict order, repetition, and a system so detailed it was almost mechanical. This was the Kensington system. Close your eyes and imagine the long, high-ceilinged corridors of Kensington Palace in the 1820s. The air is still, smelling of old floor wax, lavender, and the cold stone of the walls. There is no music here, no shouting, only the rhythmic, steady sound of a young girl's shoes on the polished wood. Left, right, left, right. A small, predictable beat in a very large, quiet house. Victoria's life was governed by a set of rules created by her mother, the Duchess of Kent, and the Duchess's ambitious advisor, Sir John Conroy. Their goal was simple, yet stifling. They wanted to ensure that Victoria remained entirely dependent on them even after she became queen. Every minute of her day was accounted for, every interaction was measured, and every thought was monitored. Think about the physical reality of this isolation. For most children, a bedroom is a place of privacy, a sanctuary for dreams and secrets. But for Victoria, privacy was a concept she wouldn't truly know until she was 18. She slept in her mother's room every single night. Imagine her small bed, tucked into a corner, surrounded by the heavy silk curtains of her mother's much larger four-poster bed. Even in sleep, she was never alone. The only sound in the dark was the rhythmic, heavy breathing of the Duchess, a constant reminder that she was always under watch. In the morning, the routine began with the precision of a clock. The heavy velvet curtains would be pulled back, letting in the pale, often misty London light. The smell of the morning was always the same, a mix of damp earth from the gardens, coal smoke from the palace chimneys, and the sharp, metallic scent of the silver tea service. The morning was for lessons. Let's drift into the schoolroom. It is a room filled with the scent of old paper, ink, and the faint dust that dances in the few sunbeams that manage to pierce the clouds. Victoria sits at a small mahogany desk. Her back is straight, her hands are still. Opposite her sits her governess, Baroness Lezen. Lezen was her only true ally, the only person who offered her a quiet, steady kind of love amidst the politics of the palace. The day was a long, slow, and repetitive cycle of learning. History, geography, and the complex languages of the European courts. Imagine the sound of her quill against the parchment. Dip, scratch, dip, scratch. It is a hypnotic sound, a boring sound, that mirrored the endless repetition of her life. She was learning French, German, and Italian, preparing for a world she was only allowed to see from a window. She was never allowed to walk down a staircase without holding the hand of an adult. Can you imagine the weight of that rule? Even as a teenager, even as she approached adulthood, she was treated as if she were made of glass. If she fell, the system might break. If she ran, the control might slip. And so, she walked. Slowly. Step by step, her hand always held, her movements always measured. Think about the silence of her social life. She was not allowed to have friends her own age. There were no playdates, no whispered secrets in the garden, no shared games. Her only constant companion was her King Charles Spaniel. Dash. Imagine Victoria sitting on the floor of the schoolroom, brushing Dash's long, silky ears. The sound of the brush against his fur, a soft, shushing, rhythmic sound. To the world, she was the future queen. But to Dash, she was just a girl who needed warmth. She would talk to him in low, hushed tones, sharing the thoughts she couldn't share with her mother or Conroy. Dash was her silent witness to the years of isolation. Her only other escape was her collection of dolls. She had over 100 of them, small figures made of wood and fabric. Let's look at them for a moment. They are arranged neatly on a table. Victoria dressed them herself, sewing tiny clothes from scraps of lace and silk. She gave each doll a name, a history, and a personality. In the world of her dolls, Victoria could create her own order. She decided who was kind, who was strict, and who was allowed to go for a walk. It was a quiet, boring form of rebellion, a way for her to exercise the power she was denied in her real life. Outside the schoolroom, there were the royal tours, what she later called her royal progresses. Conroy and her mother would take her across the country, showing her to the people. But even then, she was isolated. She sat in the back of a heavy carriage, watching the world pass by through a pane of glass. She saw the soot-stained faces of the factory workers, the cheering crowds in the marketplaces, the grand houses of the nobility. But she was never a part of it. She was like a portrait in a frame, being moved from place to place. The sound of the carriage wheels was the soundtrack of her youth. A heavy, rhythmic, grinding sound against the gravel. It was a sound that told her she was a symbol, a piece of property, a future. And then there was Sir John Conroy. He was always there, in the shadows of the drawing room, whispering with her mother. He was a man of sharp angles and cold ambitions. He tried to force Victoria to sign a document that would make him her private secretary once she became queen. He bullied her. He used the silence of the palace as a weapon. But inside the girl, something was forming. It wasn't drama, it was iron. She learned to be silent. She learned that if she didn't speak, they couldn't control her thoughts. She turned her face to the wall, she focused on her dolls, she focused on her languages. She was waiting. The Kensington system was designed to break her spirit, but it only served to temper it. The boredom was her training ground. The isolation was her classroom. Think about the long evenings in the palace drawing room. The ticking of the grandfather clock. Tick, tick, tick. The soft clink of the tea service. The rustle of her mother's silk skirts. No one spoke of the future, but everyone was thinking about it. They were waiting for the old king to die. And Victoria, sitting quietly with her embroidery, was waiting for her life to begin. This chapter of her life, the melancholy childhood, was a time of intense observation. Because she wasn't allowed to participate, she became a master of watching. She saw the power struggles, the greed, the loneliness. She saw how the world worked through the eyes of someone who was kept at a distance. So, as we walk through these silent corridors of Kensington, let the peace of the palace settle over you. Understand that the queen she became was forged in this very stillness. She learned the value of a quiet room. She learned the power of a locked door. And she learned that the most important conversations are often the ones you have with yourself, in the dark, while a city waits outside. The schoolroom is empty now. The dolls have been packed away. The girl has stepped out of the shadows. But Kensington will always be a part of her. It is the foundation of her reign, the reason she sought so much order, and the reason she valued her freedom so highly. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of the history in these walls. Let the rhythm of the ticking clock lead you into a state of deep, boring, and restorative rest. You are safe. You are at rest. The isolation is over, and the journey is just beginning. Sleep now, or drift with me, into the next chapter of a life lived under the gaze of an empire. The palace is quiet, the lights are dim, and the story continues. The night of June 19, 1837, was a night like any other in the English countryside, and yet it held the weight of an entire century within its shadows. At Windsor Castle, the air was heavy with the scent of rain and old stone. The king, William IV, lay in his final sleep, and as his heart slowed to its last, quiet beat, a ripple began to spread across the land. In this chapter, we will follow the journey of two men, two messengers of fate, as they ride through the darkness to change a young woman's life forever. Close your eyes, and imagine the sound of a heavy, iron-rimmed carriage wheel grinding against the wet gravel of the Windsor driveway. It is after 2 in the morning. The world is bathed in a deep, indigo blue, that silent hour where even the owls have stopped their hunting. The Archbishop of Canterbury and the Lord Chamberlain, two figures of immense authority, step into the carriage. The door shuts with a heavy, wooden thud. A sound of finality. Think about the atmosphere inside that carriage. It is cramped, smelling of damp wool, leather, and the faint, sharp scent of snuff. There is no light except for the swaying lanterns attached to the outside, casting erratic, golden streaks across the passing hedgerows. The horses begin their long journey toward London, toward Kensington. Listen to the rhythm of their hoofs on the road. Clip-clop, clip-clop, clip-clop. A hypnotic, steady beat that seems to pace the very heart of history. In the silence of the carriage, no one speaks. The weight of their message is too great for small talk. They are carrying a crown in their pockets, and they are heading toward a teenage girl who has never known freedom. As they travel, let's look at the landscape they pass. The English countryside in June is lush and thick. The smell of wet grass and elderflower wafts through the open window, cool and refreshing against the stuffy air of the cabin. They pass through sleeping villages, where not a single candle burns in the windows. The common people are dreaming, unaware that their king is gone, and that a new sun is about to rise. The road is long. Every bump in the path, every jolt of the carriage, marks a second passing in the old era. The messengers are tired, their eyes heavy, but the urgency of their mission keeps them upright. They are the bridge between the old world of the Georgian kings and the unknown world of the young queen. Now, let's shift our gaze back to Kensington Palace. It is 5 o'clock in the morning. The sky is no longer black, but a soft, translucent gray, like the wing of a moth. The birds are just beginning their first, tentative chirps in the palace gardens. The dew is thick on the rose petals, making them look like jewels in the dim light. Inside the palace, Victoria is still asleep in her mother's room. Her breathing is slow and shallow. She is in that deep, morning sleep where dreams are the most vivid. Perhaps she is dreaming of her dolls, or perhaps of a future where she can walk down the stairs alone. She has no idea that the carriage is turning onto the long, tree-lined drive of Kensington. The sound of the horses changes as they hit the gravel. The crunch is louder here, more echoing. The carriage stops. The dust settles in the cool morning air. The messengers step out. Their legs are stiff from the journey. They look up at the dark windows of the palace. It looks so peaceful, so ordinary. They approach the great door. Imagine the sound of the knocker. A heavy, brass ring hitting a thick, oak plate. Boom. 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 The sound tears through the silence of the palace. It echoes up the grand staircase, through the long, portrait-lined galleries, and into the servants' quarters. The palace wakes up, not with a shout, but with a collective gasp. Inside, a servant fumbles with a flint to light a candle. The small, orange flame flickers to life, fighting against the gray dawn. Footsteps begin to hurry across the wooden floors. Whispers fill the halls. Who is it? Why at this hour? The messengers are brought into a small waiting room. It is cold. The fire has long since gone out, leaving only the gray ghosts of ashes in the grate. They wait. They are told the princess is sleeping. We are here on business of state, the archbishop says, his voice low but firm. Even the princess's sleep must give way to this. Upstairs, the Duchess of Kent wakes her daughter. Imagine the touch of a hand on a shoulder in the dark. The confusion of being woken at such an hour. Victoria rubs her eyes. She puts on her cotton dressing gown, the one with the small floral print, and ties the silk cord around her waist. Her hair is loose, falling over her shoulders in dark waves. She walks down the stairs. This walk, this descent, is the most important journey she will ever take. Each step is a year of her childhood being left behind. Step, the rules of Kensington. Step, the shadow of Conroy. Step, the wooden dolls. She enters the room. The messengers see her. They do not see a child. They see the sovereign. The Lord Chamberlain steps forward. He sinks to one knee. The Archbishop follows. The sound of their knees hitting the carpet is soft, but it carries the weight of a mountain. Your Majesty, he whispers. The words hang in the air. Your Majesty. Victoria stands perfectly still. The pale morning light is finally beginning to fill the room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She does not cry. She does not tremble. She looks at them with those steady, blue-gray eyes, and in that moment, the isolation of Kensington ends. She knows. She understands everything now. The king is dead. She is the queen. The messengers begin to explain the details, the passing of her uncle, the documents that need to be signed, the formal transition of power. But Victoria's mind is already moving ahead. She is thinking of the council meeting, of the declaration she must make, and of that 1 hour of solitude she will soon demand. Think of the contrast in that room. The 2 old men in their formal clothes, dusty from the road, and the young woman in her nightgown, looking like an angel in the dawnlight, yet possessing the power of an empire. Outside, the sun finally breaks over the horizon. It hits the golden weather vane on the palace roof, making it shine like a beacon. The world is starting to wake up. A milkman is making his rounds, a chimney sweep is starting his fire, a mother is waking her children. They don't know yet. But the world has changed. The Georgian era, with its excess and its old ways, has faded into the mist. The Victorian era has begun. As the messengers finally leave to prepare for the day's ceremonies, Victoria stands alone in the hallway for a moment. She looks at the stairs she just descended. She looks at the door to her mother's room. She is the queen, and the silence of the midnight messenger is replaced by the quiet, inner strength of a woman who knows her own mind. Let's stay here for a moment, in this transitional light. Feel the coolness of the palace floor, the smell of the morning dew, and the profound sense of peace that comes after a great change. The long night is over. The messenger has delivered his word. And the girl who was guarded so closely is now the one who guards the nation. Take a deep breath. Let the rhythm of the horse's hoofs fade in your mind. Let the image of the kneeling men stay with you, a reminder that power often comes in the quietest of moments. You are safe. You are at rest. The story is just beginning, but for now, let the dawn wash over you, and find your own peace in the stillness of the morning. Sleep, and dream of empires rising, and the quiet strength of a heart that knows its path. The sun has now fully risen over Kensington, and the messengers have departed with the news that will soon reach every corner of the globe. But inside the palace walls, a much smaller, much more personal revolution is taking place. This is the moment when Victoria, no longer a princess under guard, but a queen in her own right, reaches out and touches the very first thread of her freedom. Close your eyes, and imagine the atmosphere of that morning. The air is no longer heavy with the tension of the night. Instead, there is a lightness, a strange, quiet electricity that hums through the corridors. For 18 years, Victoria had been a prisoner of a system. Every hour of her day was scheduled by others. Every meal was shared. Every thought was monitored. But now, as the clock on the mantelpiece strikes 8, she realizes that the rules have dissolved. The Kensington system has crumbled, not with a bang, but with the soft bowing of two men in a drawing room. Think about the first thing she does. It is something so simple, yet so profound. She asks for her bed to be moved. For her entire life, she had slept in her mother's room. Think of the lack of privacy, the constant presence of another's breathing, the feeling of being watched even in sleep. On this first morning of her reign, she gives a quiet command. She wants her own room. She wants a space where the walls only listen to her breath, where the silence is hers alone to keep. Imagine the servants moving the heavy wooden furniture. The sound of the bed frame sliding across the carpet, a muffled, rhythmic dragging sound. The Duchess of Kent stands in the doorway, watching. For the first time, she cannot say no. The power has shifted. The daughter is now the sovereign, and the mother is a subject. This is the first taste of freedom. It isn't a grand banquet or a parade. It is the quiet click of a door being locked from the inside, by her own hand. Let's linger in that newly private room for a moment. The scent of the room is fresh. Perhaps a window has been cracked open to let in the morning air. The curtains are a soft cream color, swaying gently in the breeze. Victoria stands in the center of the room. She is alone. Truly alone. Take a deep breath with her. Feel the expansion of her chest, the release of a weight she has carried since she was a toddler. In this silence, she isn't the heir. She isn't the project. She is simply Victoria. But freedom, she soon discovers, is not just about being alone. It is about the power to choose who is with you. Later that morning, she holds her first Privy Council meeting. Imagine a grand room filled with nearly 100 men. Old men. Powerful men. Men like the Duke of Wellington, who had defeated Napoleon. They are all wearing their finest uniforms, their chests heavy with medals, their faces etched with the lines of decades of politics. They are waiting for a girl. Many of them expect her to stumble. They expect her to be overwhelmed by the sea of black coats and stern faces. They expect her to look to her mother, or to Sir John Conroy, for guidance. The doors open. Victoria walks in. She is dressed in plain black mourning silk. She has no crown on her head, no jewels around her neck. She looks small, almost fragile, against the backdrop of the massive oak doors. But as she walks toward the chair of state, something happens to the room. The whispers die down. The rustle of paper stops. The air becomes still. Listen to the sound of her voice as she reads her declaration. It is clear. It is steady. It doesn't tremble. She speaks of her sense of duty, of her trust in Providence. She is not reading a script written by Conroy. She is speaking as the Queen. One by one, these powerful men come forward to kneel and kiss her hand. Think of the sensation of that. The rough, aged skin of a general, the dry hand of a bishop, all pressing against the small, youthful hand of a woman they must now obey. This is her second taste of freedom. The freedom to command respect without asking for it. After the meeting, as the carriages of the ministers pull away, Victoria returns to her private quarters. She is exhausted, but her mind is racing. She makes another decision. She orders that Sir John Conroy is to be barred from her presence. Imagine the silence that follows that order. The man who had tried to control her life, who had bullied her and hovered over her mother, is suddenly erased from her world. He is relegated to the shadows of the palace, a ghost of a past she is finished with. She then turns to her mother. She loves her mother, but she knows the boundaries must be set. She moves her mother's apartments far away from her own. Not out of cruelty, but out of a desperate need to breathe. Freedom is a quiet room. Freedom is a locked door. Freedom is choosing your own friends. She spends the afternoon with her beloved Lesin, her governess. They sit by the window, perhaps drinking tea from thin, bone china cups. The clink of the spoon against the saucer is a peaceful, domestic sound. They talk, not of lessons or rules, but of the future. Victoria looks out over the gardens of Kensington. She sees the people gathered at the gates, trying to catch a glimpse of their new queen. To them, she is a symbol of a new era. To her, the world has finally opened up. Think of the contrast between her life 24 hours ago and her life now. Yesterday, she was told when to sit, when to stand, and what to think. Today, she decides the fate of a nation. But even in this freedom, there is a new kind of weight. It is the weight of responsibility. Every letter she signs, every document she reads, carries the lives of millions. Yet, she finds this weight easier to bear than the chains of Kensington. Because this weight is hers. As the evening begins to fall, and the sky turns a deep, bruised purple, Victoria sits at her desk. The same desk where she used to do her schoolwork. But now, the papers are different. She begins her journal entry for the day. I shall do my utmost to fulfill my duty towards my country, she writes. I am very young, and perhaps in many, though not in all things, inexperienced, but I am sure that very few have more real goodwill than I have. The scratching of her pen is the only sound in the room. It is a rhythmic, soothing sound. It is the sound of a woman taking ownership of her own story. The first taste of freedom is sweet, but it is also serious. It is the end of the girl, and the beginning of the icon. Tonight, as you listen to this, think about your own spaces of freedom. The quiet moments when you are just yourself, without the expectations of the world. Value them. Protect them. Victoria's journey into freedom was a long one, fought for in the silence of her heart. Now, as the first day of her reign comes to a close, she can finally sleep in a room of her own. She can finally dream her own dreams. Let the peace of her solitude wash over you. Feel the coolness of the sheets, the stillness of the night air, and the comfort of being in your own space. The palace is quiet now. The guards stand at the gates, but they are there to protect the queen, not to watch the prisoner. Sleep, and find your own freedom in the world of dreams. The day is done, and a new era has begun. As the young queen settles into her new life in London, as she learns to navigate the grand halls of Buckingham Palace and the weight of her crown, our story must briefly leave the English mist. We must travel east, across the choppy waters of the North Sea, through the rolling green hills of the German states, to a place called Coburg. Close your eyes, and imagine a world that feels like a fairy tale captured in amber. A place of deep, ancient forests, where the wind whispers through the pine needles, and the air is always cool and scented with wood smoke and damp earth. This is the home of Prince Albert. In this chapter, we meet the man who was destined to be the silent architect of an era. But before he was a prince of England, he was a boy of the forest. Albert was born in the summer of 1819. At Schloss Rosenau, a beautiful, modest castle tucked away in the German countryside. Think of the sound of a summer afternoon in Coburg. The rhythmic buzzing of bees in the wildflower meadows, the distant chime of a church bell from the village below, and the soft rustle of the leaves in the palace gardens. Albert's childhood was very different from Victoria's, yet it was marked by its own kind of quiet sorrow. His parents' marriage was unhappy, and his mother was eventually sent away, never to see her sons again. This loss created a stillness in Albert, a gravity. He was a serious child, with thoughtful, dark eyes that seemed to be constantly observing, constantly analyzing the world around him. Imagine him as a young boy, sitting by a stream in the Thuringian forest. The water is clear, flowing over smooth, gray stones with a gentle, babbling sound. Albert isn't playing with soldiers or dreaming of battles. He is collecting rocks. He is studying plants. He is listening to the intricate music of nature. He was a scholar from the beginning. While other princes were learning to hunt, Albert was learning to think. He loved the order of science. He loved the logic of music. For him, the world was a giant puzzle that could be solved with patience and intellect. But there was another plan for Albert, one that had been whispered about in the corridors of power since he was in the cradle. His uncle, King Leopold of the Belgians, and the ever-watchful Baron Stockmar, had a vision. They saw a map of Europe, and they saw two children. One in London, one in Coburg. Cousins, born just months apart. They saw a union that could stabilize a continent. But Albert knew very little of this as a young man. He was busy at the University of Bonn, diving into the works of philosophy, law, and history. Imagine the atmosphere of his study. A room filled with the smell of old leather-bound books, ink, and the cold, crisp air coming through an open window. He would stay up late into the night, the only light coming from a single lamp, as he filled notebooks with his neat, precise handwriting. He was a man of discipline. a man who believed that life should have a purpose. In 1836, when they were both 17, Albert was sent to England for the first time. It was a formal visit, a chance for the two cousins to finally look at one another. Think of Victoria's reaction. She was still the princess under the Kensington system then. She wrote in her diary that Albert was extremely handsome, with a beautiful nose and a fine mouth. She liked his wit, and the way he could sit at the piano and play with such deep, soulful emotion. But for Albert, the visit was overwhelming. He was a creature of the quiet German woods, and London was loud. It was smoky. The late-night balls and the constant social pressure exhausted him. He often felt sleepy in the middle of dinner parties, his mind drifting back to the silence of Coburg. He didn't know yet that he would one day be the master of this loud, sprawling city. After the visit, he returned to his studies. He traveled to Italy, looking at the great marble statues of Rome and the sun-drenched cathedrals of Florence. He was refining himself. He was becoming the man that England didn't even know it needed yet. Now, let's return to 1839. Victoria has been queen for 2 years. She is enjoying her freedom. She likes being the center of attention. She tells her advisors that she is in no hurry to marry. She likes her independence. She likes being the one who gives the orders. But the world is pressing in on her. A queen needs a king, they say. The line of succession must be secured. In October of that year, Albert and his brother Ernest arrive back in England. They travel by carriage through the rain-soaked streets of London, heading toward Windsor Castle. Listen to the sound of the carriage wheels on the wet stones. A heavy, splashing sound. Albert is 20 years old now. He is taller, more confident, but that same thoughtful gravity remains in his eyes. He is nervous. He knows why he is here. At Windsor, the castle is glowing with light. Imagine the grand staircase, lined with servants in their scarlet liveries. The air is thick with the scent of lilies and beeswax. Victoria is waiting for him at the top of the stairs. As he walks up, she sees him. And something changes. The handsome cousin of 3 years ago is gone. In his place is a man of substance. A man who looks at her not just as a queen, but as a person. For the next few days, they walk in the gardens of Windsor. The autumn leaves are falling, painting the grass in shades of burnt orange and deep red. The wind is cool, nipping at their cheeks. They talk. Not about politics, but about art, about their childhoods, about their shared losses. Albert speaks of the forests of Coburg, and Victoria finds herself drawn to his calm, steady presence. He is like an anchor in the storm of her busy life. He is the first person who doesn't want to use her for power. But there is a problem. Because Victoria is the queen, Albert cannot propose to her. Tradition dictates that she must be the one to ask. Think about the weight of that silence between them. Two young people, falling in love, yet held apart by the very crown that brought them together. As you listen to the story of this distant cousin, let your own mind drift to a place of quiet order. Imagine the pine forests of Germany, the smell of the needles underfoot, and the steady, slow heartbeat of a man who was prepared to leave everything he knew for love. The world sees a political alliance. But in the quiet corners of Windsor, a much deeper, more boring, and more beautiful connection is being made. Albert is the silence to Victoria's noise. He is the logic to her emotion. And as the sun sets over the castle towers, the boy from the woods is about to become the partner of a queen. Take a deep breath. Feel the coolness of the German forest in your mind. Let the rhythm of the wind through the trees soothe you. You are safe. You are at rest. The journey is continuing, and the two pieces of the puzzle are finally coming together. Sleep now, and dream of quiet gardens, shared music, and the steady, patient arrival of a destiny that was written in the stars long before they ever met. The winds of autumn are swirling around the stone towers of Windsor Castle, and inside, the air is thick with the scent of burning pine logs and the soft, flickering glow of 1,000 candles. We find ourselves in the grand ballroom, a space of gold leaf, crimson velvet, and mirrored walls that seem to stretch the night into eternity. In this chapter, we aren't looking at the political machinery of an empire. We are looking at a dance. A simple, rhythmic movement that masked a deep, quiet tension between two souls who were still strangers to one another's hearts. This was the awkward first waltz of Victoria and Albert. Close your eyes and imagine the sound of an orchestra tuning their instruments in the distance. The low hum of a cello, the sharp, clear note of a violin, and the soft, wooden tap of a conductor's baton. It is a messy, unorganized sound that slowly, very slowly, begins to find its harmony. The ballroom is crowded. The air is warm, smelling of expensive perfumes, powdered wigs, and the metallic tang of the silver candelabras. The nobility of England is here, watching. They are always watching. They whisper behind their fans, their eyes darting between the young queen and her German cousin. Victoria is standing at the head of the room. She is wearing a dress of white silk, her waist cinched tight, her diamonds catching the candlelight and throwing tiny, dancing stars across the ceiling. She is nervous. You can see it in the way her fingers ever so slightly tap against her fan. And then, there is Albert. He stands a few paces away. He is dressed in his dark uniform, his medals perfectly aligned, his hair swept back with precision. But he looks out of place. For a man who loves the silence of the Coburg forests and the logic of a university library, this ballroom is a chaotic, exhausting sea of noise. Think about the physical space between them. It is only a few yards of polished oak floor, yet it feels like an ocean. The music begins. A waltz. The waltz in the 1830s was still considered a bit scandalous by the older generation. It required a closeness, a physical connection that other dances did not. It was a dance of circles, of constant movement, of losing one's sense of direction in the arms of another. Albert steps forward. The sound of his boots on the floor is a singular, sharp note that cuts through the whispers. He bows. A deep, formal German bow. Victoria curtsies, her silk skirts rustling like the sound of a hidden stream. He takes her hand. Pause for a moment and think about that first touch. Victoria's hand is small, warm, and delicate. Albert's hand is steady, cool, and firm. As their palms meet, the world outside the ballroom, the politics, the empire, the crushing weight of the Kensington system, all of it begins to fade into a blur of gold and shadow. He places his other hand on her waist. It is a formal gesture, yet it carries a sudden, overwhelming intimacy. And they begin to move. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The first few steps are awkward. Albert is a disciplined man, but he is not a natural socialite. He is thinking about his footwork, his mind analyzing the rhythm rather than feeling it. Victoria is a graceful dancer, but she is distracted by the proximity of this man who smells of lavender and the cold night air. Imagine the friction of their movements. The slight stumble as their knees brush against each other. The quick, shy glances that are immediately pulled away. They are trying to maintain their royal composure while their hearts are beating a much faster rhythm than the music allows. The room begins to spin. Left, right, turn. Left, right, turn. Listen to the sound of the ballroom. The swish of silk against silk, the rhythmic tapping of hundreds of feet, and the melodic rise and fall of the violins. It is a boring, hypnotic cycle of sound. Round and round they go, past the tall mirrors that reflect their youthful faces, past the silent statues, past the judgmental eyes of the court. As they dance, the awkwardness slowly begins to melt. It's like a frost thawing in the early spring sun. Albert's grip on her waist becomes a little more certain. Victoria's hand on his shoulder relaxes. They stop looking at their feet and start looking at each other. Albert speaks softly. His English is perfect, but it carries the soft, melodic lilt of his German upbringing. He says something about the music, or perhaps about the light. It doesn't matter what the words are. What matters is the sound of his voice, calm, steady, and private amidst the roar of the crowd. Victoria looks up at him. She notices the way his hair catches the light, the seriousness of his brow, and the kindness in his eyes. She realizes that this man isn't just a cousin or a candidate for marriage. He is a sanctuary. The waltz continues. The world is now nothing but a swirl of colors. The crimson of the curtains, the blue of the uniforms, the white of the dresses, all blending into a single, dreamlike smear. They are in the center of a hurricane, yet inside their circle, it is quiet. Think of the heat of the dance. The way the air feels thick and heavy. The way their breath hitches as the music reaches a crescendo. For a few minutes, they aren't a queen and a prince. They are just two 20-year-olds discovering the strange, frightening, and beautiful pull of attraction. The dance is a metaphor for their future. A series of movements where they must learn to follow each other's lead, where they must find harmony in the midst of chaos, where they must hold on to each other to keep from falling. But for now, it is just a dance. The music begins to slow. The violins draw out their last, long notes. The frantic pace of the waltz settles into a gentle, swaying rhythm. 1, 2, 3. They come to a stop. They are breathless. The room stops spinning, but the feeling of the movement remains in their limbs. Albert releases her waist, his hand lingering for just a fraction of a second longer than etiquette requires. Victoria takes a small step back, her chest rising and falling as she tries to catch her breath. He bows again. She curtsies. The crowd begins to applaud, a dry, rhythmic sound like falling rain. The spell is broken. The nobility moves back in, the whispers resume, and the heavy machinery of the court begins to grind once more. But something has changed. The awkwardness is gone, replaced by a quiet, shared secret. As Albert walks back to his brother, and Victoria is led away by her ladies-in-waiting, they both carry the ghost of that touch with them. Victoria goes to her room that night, her own room, her private room. She sits by the window and looks out at the moon hanging over the Windsor forest. She can still feel the pressure of Albert's hand on her waist. She can still hear the rhythmic 1, 2, 3 of the violins. She writes in her journal, her pen flying across the page, describing his beauty, his grace, and the exquisite feeling of the dance. As you listen to the echo of that waltz, let your own heart slow down. Feel the rhythm of your own breathing. In and out. In and out. The awkwardness of life, the stumbles we make, the moments when we feel out of place, they are all part of the dance. And sometimes, if we are lucky, we find someone whose hand fits perfectly in ours, and the music finally makes sense. The ballroom is dark now. The candles have been snuffed out, leaving only the scent of smoke and memories. The empire is sleeping. But the story of the queen and her prince is just beginning to find its melody. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness of the night around you. The dance is over, but the connection remains. You are safe. You are at rest. Let the image of the spinning ballroom fade into a soft, golden blur, and let yourself drift into the quiet, rhythmic sleep of a heart that has found its partner. Sleep now, and dream of music that never ends, and the steady, graceful turns of a life led with love. The dance in the grand ballroom has ended, but the echoes of the violins still seem to vibrate within the ancient stone walls of Windsor Castle. It is now the middle of October, 1839. Outside, the English autumn has settled into a state of quiet melancholy. The copper-colored leaves are drifting silently onto the palace courtyards, and inside the heart of a young queen, a silent storm is brewing. In this chapter, we witness one of those rare moments in history where royal tradition and personal love stood face to face. Victoria is no longer just a queen, she is a woman in love. But because she wears the crown, tradition dictates that Albert cannot propose to her. The words must come from the sovereign. The proposal must be hers. Close your eyes and imagine the morning of October 15th. The sky is a heavy, translucent gray, with a soft mist clinging to the windows of the castle. Victoria's private study is unnaturally still. The only sound is the rhythmic crackle of the pine logs in the fireplace, and the air is filled with the sweet, woody scent of burning cedar and the faint trail of her favorite lavender perfume. Victoria has been awake since the first light of dawn. She wrote in her journal that today would be the greatest test of her life. She stands before a tall, gilded mirror, looking at her reflection. She is wearing a simple but elegant silk dress, her hair pulled back with a blue velvet ribbon. Her palms are damp, and her heart is beating with a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. She summons the Lord Chamberlain. She gives a quiet, firm command. Prince Albert is to be brought to her, alone. Think about that moment of anticipation. When Albert received the message, he was upstairs in his quarters, talking quietly with his brother, Ernest. He stood up slowly, adjusting his dark blue coat, looking at his grave expression in the mirror one last time. He knows why he has been called, but within that knowledge is a deep, quiet tension. The sound of Albert's boots on the long, carpeted gallery is the only noise in the hallway. Click, clock, click, clock. Each step is a second of history being counted down. When he reaches the door to Victoria's study, there are no guards. Everything is private. Everything is intimate. Albert knocks softly on the heavy oak door. From inside, Victoria's voice, steady but slightly breathless, answers. Come in. Albert enters. Victoria is standing by the tall window, looking out at the mist-covered forest of Windsor. Albert walks across the room and stands beside her. A heavy, profound silence fills the space, broken only by the rhythmic tick, tick, tick of the mantel clock. Victoria turns slowly to face him. She looks directly into his eyes. She finds a calmness there that gives her the strength to speak. Her voice is low, almost a whisper, but every word is carved out of the stillness. "My dear Albert," she begins, "you must know why I have sent for you." Albert remains silent, but a ghost of a smile touches the corners of his mouth. Victoria continues, her words gathering speed as her courage rises. "It is a great sacrifice for me to ask this, but you know, because of my position, you could never have asked me. And so, the words must be mine." She pauses for a long moment. She takes a deep, grounding breath. The air in the room seems to freeze for a second. Even the flames in the hearth seem to hold their breath. "Albert, will you marry me? Will you be my companion? Will you stand by my side and help me bear the weight of this vast empire?" A long, infinite silence follows. Imagine the stillness of that room. Time has stopped in Windsor Castle. Albert's reaction is not one of shock, but of deep, quiet relief. He reaches out and takes Victoria's small hand within his own. His touch is cool, firm, and steady. "Victoria," he says in a low, melodic voice, "to be your husband would be the greatest honor of my life. I will not just stand beside you. I will be your shadow. My life, from this day forward, is yours." Victoria later wrote in her diary that at that moment, it felt as if all the clouds had vanished and a brilliant sun had filled the room. Albert took her in his arms. All the royal protocols, all the rules, all the walls of etiquette crumbled in an instant. In that room, there was no queen and no prince. There were only two young souls who had found their home in each other. They talked for hours. They spoke of their future, of the homes they would build, of their shared dreams. Albert told her, "We will not just be alone together, we will show the world that an empire can be governed by love." Listen to the peace of that room. Outside, the wind is rustling the dry leaves against the glass, but inside, everything is warm, everything is secure. This proposal was more than just a marriage contract. It was Victoria's bold declaration of her own heart. She showed the world that being a queen did not mean she had to silence her own feelings. She loved her independence, but she realized that her freedom would be even more meaningful with Albert by her side. Later that afternoon, when Victoria gave the news to her Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne, he simply smiled. He knew that the girl he had mentored was gone. She was a woman who had chosen her own destiny. That night, when Victoria went to bed, she was not alone in her thoughts. Albert's calm voice echoed in her mind. She looked out the window at the moonlight shining over the forest. The light seemed softer, kinder, more golden than ever before. History will remember this as the bold proposal. But for us, it is a very boring, quiet, and beautiful afternoon. There are no wars here, no politics, only the silent language of two people giving their lives to one another. Now, as you listen to this story, let the weight of your own body sink into the bed. Think of that quiet study in Windsor. The blue velvet curtains, the glowing fire, and the touch of two hands meeting for the first time as partners. Love often exists in these quiet, unspoken moments. It is found in the stillness between the words. Victoria's courage has opened a new path today. The difficult road of sovereignty is no longer one she has to walk alone. She has someone who understands her, someone who will guard her heart. The castle is quiet now. The guards are changing their watch. The forest of Windsor is held in a deep, rhythmic sleep. Victoria, too, has fallen asleep, a small, peaceful smile on her face. You, too, should sink into the depths of rest. Feel the security of the space around you. Let this moment in history guide you toward a deep, restorative slumber. Sleep well, and dream of white silk, of golden futures, and of the quiet strength of a heart that has found its match. The night is long, and the world is still. The bold proposal has been made, the promise has been sealed, and now the calendar turns its heavy pages to February 10th, 1840. It is a rainy, mist-filled morning in London. The sky is a pale, pearly gray, and a soft, persistent drizzle is washing the soot from the cobblestones. But inside the dressing rooms of Buckingham Palace, a transformation is taking place that will ripple through the centuries, changing the very fabric of how we imagine love and tradition. In this chapter, we step away from the grand speeches and the crowds, and enter the quiet, sacred space of the bride's chamber. We are here to witness the birth of a symbol: the white dress. Close your eyes and imagine the sound of silk. Not just any silk, but a heavy, ivory-white satin woven in the looms of Spitalfields. Listen to the sound it makes as it is lifted from its velvet-lined box. A soft, rhythmic rustle, like the sound of a gentle wind moving through a field of dry grass. This is the sound of a new era. Before this day, royal brides did not wear white. They wore heavy robes of silver or gold, stiff with embroidery, weighted down by the expectations of their dynasties. They were symbols of wealth, symbols of power. But Victoria, in her quiet, stubborn way, chose something different. She chose to be a woman before she was a queen. Think about the physical weight of the dress. It is not light. The satin is thick, cool to the touch, with a luminous sheen that seems to hold the dim morning light within its folds. As the ladies in waiting move around the room, their footsteps are muffled by the thick carpets. The air smells of starch, fresh linen, and the sharp, green scent of orange blossoms. Victoria stands in the center of the room. She is calm. There is a stillness in her that was not there during the Kensington years. One by one, the layers are added. First, the fine linen chemise, soft against the skin. Then the corset, pulled tight with a rhythmic tug of the laces. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. It is a slow, methodical ritual. Then comes the Huntington lace. Let's pause and think about this lace. It was not made in a factory. It was made by hand, in the small cottages of Devon, by women who worked by the light of a single candle. Thousands of hours of human life are woven into these delicate, floral patterns. Victoria chose this lace specifically to support the struggling lace makers of her country. The lace is attached to the satin. The tiny, almost invisible stitches. The sound of the needle piercing the fabric. A tiny, rhythmic click. It is a boring, repetitive sound, yet it is the sound of a masterpiece being completed. As the dress is draped over her, Victoria looks in the mirror. She sees a vision in white. White, the color of purity, the color of a blank page, the color of a fresh start. She refuses the traditional velvet robes of state. She refuses the heavy crown for this moment. Instead, she places a wreath of orange blossoms in her hair. The waxen, white flowers are delicate, smelling of a distant, sun-drenched grove. They are a symbol of fertility, of a life beginning to bloom. Think about the silence in the room as the veil is lowered. A thin, translucent mist of lace falling over her face. It softens the world around her. The faces of her ladies become blurred, the furniture becomes shadows. Inside the veil, it is just Victoria and her breath. She is 20 years old. She is about to marry the man she loves. Outside, the rain is still falling, but the crowds are gathering. They are standing in the mud, under thousands of black umbrellas, waiting for a glimpse of the White Queen. They don't know yet that they are witnessing a revolution in fashion. They don't know that for the next 200 years, brides across the world, from the smallest villages to the greatest cities, will follow the lead of this young woman in her ivory satin. But here, in the quiet of the palace, there is no fashion. There is only the feeling of the fabric against her skin. The coolness of the silk, the lightness of the lace. The clock on the wall ticks, tick, tick, tick. The hour is approaching. Victoria picks up her bouquet. It is simple, filled with myrtle and orange blossoms. The stems are wrapped in silk ribbon. She feels the moisture from the flowers on her fingertips. She begins to walk toward the door. Listen to the sound of the train. 6 young bridesmaids, all in white, carry the heavy tail of the dress. The silk slides across the floorboards. Shh, shh, shh. It is a soothing, continuous sound. They move through the grand hall, past the silent guards, toward the carriage that will take her to St. James's Palace. Think about the moment she steps out into the air. The coolness of the rain, the sudden roar of the crowd, the thousands of voices shouting her name. But Victoria is held in a bubble of white silk. She is focused on the chapel, and the man waiting for her at the altar. Albert is there. He is wearing the uniform of a British field marshal, but his eyes are fixed on the door. When she enters, when the light from the high windows hits the satin of her dress, the entire chapel seems to brighten. The ceremony is long. The words are ancient. The music of the organ swells, filling the stone arches with a deep, vibrating sound that shakes the very floor beneath their feet. But in the middle of the noise, there is the exchange of the rings. A simple circle of gold. The touch of Albert's hand against hers. The contrast of the dark fabric of his sleeve against the brilliant white of her cuff. This dress is not just a garment. It is a shield. It is a statement that her private heart belongs to her husband, even while her public life belongs to the world. As you listen to the description of this morning, let your mind drift to the texture of the story. Imagine the feeling of fine lace between your fingers, the smoothness of polished silk, the scent of orange blossoms in the rain. The world is loud, the world is messy, but inside the symbolism of the white dress, there is a sense of perfect, quiet order. The ceremony ends. The bells of London begin to ring, a wild, joyous clanging that echoes from the Tower to Westminster. But as Victoria and Albert step into their carriage, as the door shuts and the noise is muffled, she looks at the white fabric spread out around her. It is no longer a blank page. The first chapter of their life together has been written. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of your own blankets, soft and warm against you. Let the image of the white silk fade into a gentle, pearly mist. You are safe. You are at rest. The ritual is complete, and the story is moving into a new, peaceful light. Sleep now, and dream of lace and light, of promises kept in the rain, and of the quiet beauty of a tradition born from a single, courageous heart. The palace is quiet, the rain has turned to a soft mist, and the era of the White Queen has truly begun. The bells of the wedding have long since faded into the soft London fog, the white silk dress has been carefully folded into its cedar chest, and the grand public ceremonies have given way to the quiet, rhythmic reality of daily life. We find ourselves now in the heart of the palace, in a room that is neither a ballroom nor a throne room. This is the Queen's private study. In this chapter, we aren't looking at the crown or the scepter. We are looking at two mahogany desks, placed side by side, so close that the shadows of those working at them often overlap. This is the story of a partnership built not on grand gestures, but on the steady, boring, and beautiful labor of shared purpose. Close your eyes, and listen to the silence of this room. It is not a hollow silence. It is a full silence, thick with the scent of beeswax, old leather-bound ledgers, and the sharp, slightly metallic smell of fresh ink. In the center of the room, the fireplace is a low, glowing ember. The logs have settled into a bed of gray ash, and every now and then, a tiny spark pops, a small, sharp sound that only emphasizes the stillness. Victoria is seated at her desk. Beside her, almost mirroring her posture, is Albert. Think about the sound of their work. The most prominent sound is the scratching of the quill pen against the heavy, cream-colored parchment. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It is a rhythmic sound, like the breathing of the room itself. Then comes the soft, wet sound of the pen being dipped back into the crystal inkwell. A tiny clink as the nib touches the glass. This was their ritual. Every morning, after a simple breakfast, they would retreat to this sanctuary. For Victoria, this was a radical change. Before Albert, she had navigated the mountain of state papers alone, or under the heavy shadow of Lord Melbourne. But now, she has an anchor. She has a partner who doesn't want to rule over her, but to rule with her. Albert is a man of order. Watch him as he works. He organizes the chaotic piles of documents into neat, categorized stacks. He writes in a precise, disciplined hand, his German education showing in every perfectly formed letter. He reads the long, boring reports from distant colonies, the dry statistics of the Industrial Revolution, the complex treaties of European diplomacy. He digests it all, summarizes it, and presents it to Victoria with a calm, steady logic. There is a deep, quiet intimacy in this shared labor. Imagine the small movements between them. Victoria reaches for a blotter to dry a signature, and Albert, without even looking up from his own work, moves it within her reach. Or perhaps Albert pauses, his brow furrowed over a difficult paragraph, and Victoria places a hand on his arm, a silent gesture of support that says more than 1,000 words. They are like two gears in a grand, invisible clock, turning together, perfectly synchronized. Outside the window, the world is rushing by. London is growing, steamships are crossing the Atlantic, the telegraph is beginning to pulse with the first signals of a connected world. But inside this room, time is measured by the turning of a page. The soft, papery rustle of a sheet being moved from the pending pile to the finished pile. Listen to the clock on the mantelpiece. It is a French clock, encased in gold and glass. Tick, 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 tick. It is the heartbeat of their partnership. It reminds them that while their love is timeless, their duty is bound by the ticking seconds of the empire's needs. Albert brought a new atmosphere to the palace. He replaced the old, aristocratic laziness with a modern, middle-class work ethic. He believed that royalty was a job, a heavy responsibility that required constant, diligent attention. And Victoria, drawn to his strength, followed his lead. Think about the physical space of the desks. Victoria's desk is slightly smaller, filled with personal trinkets, a small painting of her dog, Dash, a lock of Albert's hair in a locket. Albert's desk is Spartan, dominated by maps, architectural drawings, and scientific journals. Two different minds, two different temperaments, but one singular purpose. Sometimes, the work becomes too heavy. The reports of poverty in the northern mills, the tensions in the east, the crushing weight of being a symbol for millions. In those moments, the scratching of the pen stops. They look at each other. The silence in the room changes. It becomes a space of recovery. They might share a quiet cup of tea, the silver spoon clinking softly against the fine-boned china. Or they might walk to the window together, watching the rain wash over the palace gardens, finding peace in the grey, boring beauty of a London afternoon. This was the two desks era. It was the time when the British monarchy transformed from an ancient, often disconnected power into a modern, working institution. And it happened right here, in the quiet friction of pen on paper. As you listen to the steady rhythm of this story, let your own mind find a sense of order. Imagine your thoughts as papers being neatly stacked. Feel the calm, productive energy of a partnership that knows its path. There is something deeply comforting about the idea of not being alone in your work. Of having someone beside you, whose breathing matches yours, whose pen moves in harmony with your own. The day is winding down now. The light in the study is turning a deep, golden amber as the sun sets behind the London skyline. The ink in the wells is running low. The last signatures have been blotted. Albert stands up. He stretches his back, a slow, tired movement. He walks over to Victoria's desk, and together, they look at the work they have accomplished. It is a mountain of paper, but it represents a world kept in balance. They blow out the candles. One by one, the small flames vanish, leaving behind a thin trail of white smoke and the lingering scent of warm wax. The room is plunged into a soft, blue twilight. The desks remain, side by side, waiting for the dawn. Take a deep breath. Feel the support of the bed beneath you, like a steady desk for your dreams. Let the sound of the ticking clock lead you into a rhythmic, peaceful state of mind. You are safe. You are at rest. The work of the day is done. The papers are filed, the ink is dry, and the purpose has been fulfilled. Sleep now, and dream of shared paths, of quiet, steady labor, and of the profound peace that comes from having a partner in the shadows. The palace is still, the empire is quiet, and the two desks are held in the gentle embrace of the night. The scratching of the quills in the London study has faded, the heavy curtains of Buckingham Palace have been drawn, and the carriage is moving away from the soot and the noise of the city. We are traveling south, through the rolling green hills of Hampshire, toward the edge of the land, where the air begins to taste of salt and the horizon opens into a vast, shimmering blue. In this chapter, we find ourselves at Osborne House, on the Isle of Wight. This is not a palace of state, but a sanctuary of the heart. Here, in this Italianate villa overlooking the Solent, Victoria and Albert created a world that was entirely their own. A place where the Queen could simply be a mother, and the Prince could be an architect of peace. Close your eyes, and listen to the sound of the sea. It is not the roar of a storm, but the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the tide against the shingle beach. Shh! Wash! Shh! Wash! It is a boring, hypnotic sound, a sound that has remained unchanged since the dawn of time. The air here is different. It is cool, crisp, and carries the scent of pine needles, wild gorse, and the cold, mineral spray of the ocean. Take a deep breath of that air. Let it clear the smoke of London from your lungs. Osborne House was Albert's masterpiece. He designed it to resemble the villas of Naples, with its pale yellow walls and its twin towers reaching toward the sky. But inside, it was filled with the warmth of a family. Imagine the sounds of a summer afternoon in the nursery. The distant, muffled laughter of children playing on the lawn. The soft, melodic hum of a nanny singing a lullaby in a room upstairs. The click, clack, click of wooden blocks being stacked on a nursery floor. These are the sounds of the domestic sanctuary. For Victoria, Osborne was a liberation. Here, she could take off the heavy silk dresses and the weight of the crown. Imagine her walking through the gardens in a simple muslin dress, a straw bonnet shading her eyes from the sun. She is carrying a small basket, stopping to pick wildflowers or to watch a butterfly dance over the lavender. She is no longer the sovereign of an empire. She is a woman walking in her garden, feeling the grass beneath her feet. Albert, too, found his peace here. He was often seen with his sleeves rolled up, working alongside the gardeners. He obsessed over the placement of every shrub, the curve of every path. He wanted to create a paradise where his children could grow up with a sense of wonder. Think about the Swiss cottage. A small, wooden house Albert had built specifically for the children. It was a place for them to learn. They had their own small plots of land where they grew vegetables. They had a kitchen where they learned to bake bread. They even had a small museum for the rocks and shells they collected from the beach. There is a profound beauty in this intentional boredom. The slow passage of time, the focus on small, tactile tasks, the absence of the great affairs of state. Listen to the afternoon. A bee is buzzing lazily around a cluster of bluebells. The sound is steady, a low drone that seems to pull the heat of the sun into the ground. A distant boat bell rings out on the water, a singular, silver note that hangs in the air before dissolving into the mist. Inside the house, the rooms are cool and quiet. The sunlight filters through the tall windows, casting long, golden rectangles across the parquet floors. The furniture is comfortable, meant for sitting and reading, not for standing and ceremony. In the evenings, the family would gather in the drawing room. There was no orchestra here. Instead, Victoria would sit at the piano. Think of the sound of the piano. A simple melody, perhaps a song by Mendelssohn. The notes are soft, clear, and slightly melancholic. Albert would stand beside her, his hand resting on the back of her chair, sometimes singing along in his warm, baritone voice. The children would sit on the rug, listening, their heads nodding as sleep began to find them. This was the core of their strength. This domestic peace was the fuel that allowed them to return to the chaos of London and the pressures of the empire. But even in this sanctuary, the world was never far away. The telegraph lines reached even here. The red boxes filled with papers still arrived every morning. But at Osborne, the papers felt less heavy. The problems of the world seemed smaller when viewed against the backdrop of the eternal sea. Let's walk down to the private beach. The Queen's Alcove. Imagine Victoria sitting in her bathing machine, being wheeled into the water. The sound of the wooden wheels crunching over the pebbles. The cold shock of the water against her skin. The feeling of being weightless, held by the ocean. When she returned to the shore, she would sit in the shade of the alcove, watching the sun set over the water. The sky would turn from gold to orange to a deep, bruised purple. The sea would turn to silver, then to black. This is the stillness we all seek. A place where we are not defined by our titles, our jobs, or our responsibilities. A place where we are just ourselves, part of the landscape, part of the rhythm of the tide. As you listen to the description of this sanctuary, let your own room become an Osborne. Feel the safety of your walls, the comfort of your bed, the quiet of the night. You don't need to be a queen to find a sanctuary. You only need to find the silence. The house is settling now. The fires in the grates have been banked for the night. The children are asleep in their beds, their breathing deep and even. Victoria and Albert are standing on the balcony, looking out at the lights of the ships in the Solent. The wind is whispering through the trees, a soft, hushing sound. The sea continues its endless, boring, beautiful work of washing the shore. Take a deep breath. Feel the coolness of the sea breeze in your imagination. Let the rhythmic sound of the waves guide you into a state of total relaxation. You are safe. You are at rest. The sanctuary is holding you. The gentle waves of Osborne have faded into the background, and we find ourselves returning to London. But the city we left is not the city we find. It is the year 1851. A year of shimmering glass, of iron beams, and of a vision so grand it felt as if the future itself had landed in the middle of Hyde Park. In this chapter, we follow Prince Albert as he steps fully into his role as the architect of progress. He is no longer just the Queen's husband, he is the mastermind behind the Great Exhibition. This is the story of the Crystal Palace, a cathedral of industry, and the quiet, persistent genius of the man who built it. Close your eyes and imagine the sound of glass. Not the sound of glass breaking, but the sound of glass breathing. Thousands upon thousands of panes, held together by a skeletal frame of iron. Imagine a building so vast that it enclosed the giant elm trees of Hyde Park within its walls. A building that seemed to dissolve into the sky. Albert's mind was a map of the world's potential. He looked at the smoking chimneys of the north, the steamships in the docks, the intricate looms of the weavers, and he saw a symphony. He believed that if you brought all the nations of the world together, if you showed them each other's inventions and arts, you could create a path toward peace through understanding. Think about the physical labor of this dream. The rhythmic clanging of hammers against iron. Clang, clang, clang. It is a steady, industrious sound. The creak of the pulleys as the great glass sheets are lifted into the air. The soft, papery rustle of blueprints being unrolled on a wooden table. Albert was everywhere. He was on the construction site at dawn, his coat dusted with lime, his shoes muddy. He sat in endless committee meetings, listening to the skeptics, the politicians who said it was too expensive, the critics who said the glass would shatter under the sun. He met them all with the same calm, German logic. He didn't raise his voice. He simply presented the facts. He was the silence at the center of the storm. Listen to the atmosphere of the construction. The air smells of coal smoke, fresh paint, and the sharp, ozone scent of a coming storm. There is a hum of activity that never truly stops. It is a boring, repetitive rhythm of progress. Piece by piece, the palace rises. Now, imagine the doors opening on May 1st. The morning is crisp. A soft mist is rising off the serpentine. Victoria is there, beside Albert. She is wearing a dress of pink and silver, her eyes reflecting the glittering glass above her. She later wrote that it was the greatest day of her life. As they walk through the grand entrance, the scale of it takes your breath away. The light is different inside the crystal palace. It is a diffused, pearly light, softened by the sheer height of the roof. It feels like being inside a giant diamond. Think about the sounds of the exhibition. The distant, hollow echo of footsteps on the wooden floorboards. The low, continuous murmur of thousands of voices, a sound like a distant hive of bees. And then, the machinery. In the machine hall, the future is alive. The rhythmic thumping of steam engines. Thump, hiss, thump, hiss. It is a hypnotic, mechanical heartbeat. The whir of the printing presses, the clatter of the automated looms. These are the sounds of a world being reborn. Albert walks through the aisles. He looks at the diamond from India, the Kohinoor, sitting in its cage of iron. He looks at the statues from Italy, the furniture from Austria, the agricultural tools from America. He sees the global family. For Albert, this wasn't about pride. It was about education. He wanted the working man to see what was possible. He wanted the philosopher to see the beauty of the machine. He was weaving the threads of the 19th century into a single, magnificent tapestry. Take a deep breath. Imagine the cool air inside that glass cathedral. Even with thousands of people, the space is so vast that it feels quiet. It feels sacred. But the cost to Albert was high. Think about the long nights in his study, the flickering candle, the mountains of correspondence. He was exhausted. The great exhibition was a triumph, but it was a triumph that drained his spirit. He gave everything he had to this vision of progress. He believed that the kingdom of God is within us, and that work, honest, diligent work, was a form of prayer. Listen to the evening inside the palace after the crowds have gone. The shadows of the trees inside the building grow long and distorted against the glass. The machinery has been turned off. The silence is heavy, pregnant with the memory of the day's energy. Albert stands alone in the center of the transept. He looks up at the stars through the glass roof. The palace is a bridge between the earth and the heavens. As you listen to the story of this architect, let your own mind find its structure. Imagine your worries as small fragments of glass, being fitted into a grand, beautiful design. Feel the calm, steady power of a vision that looks beyond the present moment. There is a profound peace in progress when it is led by a heart that seeks harmony. The lights of the exhibition are fading now. The era of the Crystal Palace will eventually pass, the glass will be moved, the iron will be recycled. But the spirit of that year, the idea that we can build a better world together, remains. Take a deep breath. Feel the support of your bed, as solid as an iron beam. Let the rhythmic sound of the steam engine in your memory turn into the rhythmic sound of your own breathing. You are safe. You are at rest. The palace of your mind is clear, and filled with a soft, diffusing light. Sleep now, and dream of structures made of light, of worlds coming together in peace, and of the quiet, tireless man who saw the future in a sheet of glass. The city is quiet, the park is still, and the dream of progress is held in the gentle embrace of the night. The grand cheers for the great exhibition have settled into a distant hum, and the world of iron and glass has been replaced by a world of soft wool, cradle songs, and the flickering light of a night lamp. We are back within the private heart of the palace, but the air here is heavy with a different kind of responsibility. This is the story of a queen who was also a mother to 9 children, and the quiet, often invisible struggles that took place behind the nursery doors. In this chapter, we peel back the layers of royal portraiture. We move past the images of perfectly dressed children and serene family scenes, to find the weary woman who had to balance the weight of a crown with the relentless demands of a growing family. Close your eyes, and listen to the rhythm of the nursery at night. The slow, steady creak, creak, creak of a wooden rocking chair against the floorboards. The sound of a child's deep, rhythmic breathing. The soft, papery rustle of a silk gown as a mother moves quietly across the room so as not to wake the sleepers. For Victoria, motherhood was a complicated landscape. She lived in an era that romanticized the angel in the house, the perfect, tireless mother. But Victoria was honest, perhaps dangerously so for her time. She spoke of the shadow side of motherhood, the physical toll, the loss of self, and the overwhelming exhaustion that comes with bringing 9 lives into the world. Think about the physical reality of her life between 1840 and 1857. For nearly 17 years, she was almost constantly either pregnant or recovering from childbirth. Imagine the sensation of the heavy velvet robes of state feeling tighter and more restrictive each month. The way the heat of the throne room felt stifling as she carried the extra weight of a child. The way her back ached during the long, boring ceremonies where she had to stand for hours. She described pregnancy as being like a dog or a cat, a natural but grueling process that stripped away her dignity as a sovereign. Take a deep breath and feel that tension. The struggle to be the symbol of an empire while your own body feels like it no longer belongs to you. But then, there were the nurseries. Imagine the sounds of a rainy afternoon in the children's wing. The pitter-patter of small feet running down the hallway, a sound like a gentle rain on a tin roof. The sudden, bright peal of a baby's laughter, followed by the low, shushing voice of a nursemaid. The clatter of tin soldiers being moved across a table, and the soft, repetitive scratching of a pencil as the older children do their lessons. Victoria loved her children, but she was often overwhelmed by them. She found babies frightful in their early months, with their frog-like movements and their unpredictable needs. She was a woman of intense emotions, and the chaos of 9 different personalities often left her feeling frayed. This is where Albert became her sanctuary once again. Think of Albert in the nursery. He was the one who brought order to the chaos. He designed the curriculum for their education. He was the one who would pick up a crying child and walk the floor until they were quiet. He was the steady hand that kept the domestic ship from capsizing. Listen to the quiet conversations between them late at night, after the last candle in the nursery has been snuffed out. They are sitting by the fire in Victoria's dressing room. The air smells of warm milk and wood smoke. Victoria is leaning her head on Albert's shoulder, her eyes closed. "I am so tired, Albert," she might whisper. And Albert, in his calm, melodic voice, would remind her of the legacy they were building. He would talk about the future of their children, how they would marry into the royal houses of Europe, how they would be the seeds of a new, peaceful world. His voice is a boring, soothing rhythm, like a lullaby for the Queen's soul. There were the struggles of discipline, too. Victoria was a strict mother, often projecting her own anxieties onto her eldest son, Bertie. She worried he wasn't enough like Albert. She worried he was too much like her own uncles, the wild, irresponsible kings of the past. The nursery was a battlefield of expectations. The scratch of the tutor's pen as he marked another poor grade. The silence in the room when the Queen entered, the children standing stiffly, their hearts beating fast under their starched collars. But there were also the moments of pure, domestic peace. Imagine a snowy morning at Windsor. The world outside is muffled, white, and perfectly still. The family is gathered in the breakfast room. The smell of toasted bread and tea fills the air. The children are excited, pointing at the frost patterns on the window panes. For a few minutes, they aren't the royal family of Great Britain. They are just a family, warm and safe against the cold. Victoria would watch them, and in those moments, the struggle would fade into a deep, quiet gratitude. As you listen to the story of these nursery years, let your own mind find its place of rest. Imagine the weight of your responsibilities as a heavy cloak that you are now unhooking and laying aside. Feel the softness of your pillow, as welcoming as a mother's touch. There is a profound beauty in the boring parts of family life. The repetition of the bedtime stories. The ritual of the evening prayer. The way the house settles into a particular kind of silence once the children are asleep. Think about the nursery clock. A simple, wooden clock with a steady, hollow, tick-tock. It doesn't care about empires or wars. It only cares about the next feeding, the next nap, the next tomorrow. Victoria's struggles with motherhood were real, but they were the things that made her relatable to her people. Behind the diamonds, she was a woman who knew the loneliness of a long night with a sick child. She knew the frustration of not being understood by those she loved most. The lights in the palace are dimming now. The nurses are making their final rounds, adjusting a blanket here, smoothing a pillow there. The Queen is finally in her own bed, the weight of the crown replaced by the simple, heavy warmth of sleep. Take a deep breath. Feel the rhythm of your own breathing, matching the peaceful rhythm of the sleeping palace. You are safe. You are at rest. The struggles of the day are over, and the quiet of the night is yours to keep. Sleep now, and dream of soft nurseries, of rocking chairs in the moonlight, and of the quiet, enduring strength of a heart that gives itself to others. The palace is still, the children are dreaming, and the Queen is finally at peace. The long, exhausting days of the nursery have settled into a quiet evening, and the seasons are beginning to shift. We move away from the bright sun of Osborne and the glass light of the exhibition, toward the cold, crisp air of a London December. The sky is a deep, velvety indigo, and the first flakes of snow are beginning to drift past the street lamps of Windsor. In this chapter, we explore the warmth that Victoria and Albert created within the cold stone walls of their palaces. This is the story of how a German prince brought the magic of his childhood forests to England, and how together, they invented the modern idea of a family holiday. These are the traditions born of love. Close your eyes, and imagine the scent of a winter woods brought indoors. The sharp, resinous smell of a fresh-cut fir tree. The earthy, sweet aroma of pine needles warming near a fireplace. Before Albert, the English Christmas was a quiet, religious affair, or a rowdy celebration in the streets. But Albert brought something different. He brought the Weihnachtsbaum, the Christmas tree. Think about the ritual of the tree. Imagine the sound of a heavy wooden chest being opened. Inside, wrapped in soft tissue paper, are the ornaments. Small, hand-painted glass baubles from Coburg, tiny wax candles, and gilded walnuts tied with silk ribbons. Listen to the quiet activity in the red drawing room at Windsor. The soft, papery rustle of the tissue paper. The delicate, glass-on-glass clink as the ornaments are hung upon the branches. The rhythmic, metallic snap of the candle clips being fastened to the wood. Albert is there, standing on a ladder. He is precise, as always. He wants every candle to be perfectly vertical, every ribbon to be symmetrical. Victoria stands below him, holding a basket of decorations, her face glowing in the firelight. For a few hours, they aren't managing an empire. They are simply a husband and wife, building a memory for their children. Take a deep breath. Imagine that scent of pine filling your lungs. It is the smell of safety. It is the smell of home. Now, imagine the moment the candles are lit. The room is plunged into darkness, and then, one by one, the small flames flicker to life. The light is not the harsh glare of a lamp, but a soft, golden, breathing glow. The needles of the tree catch the light, turning the green branches into a shimmering tower of emerald and gold. The children are brought to the door. Listen to the silence of their wonder. A collective intake of breath, followed by the soft, padded sound of their footsteps on the carpet as they approach the tree. This was Albert's gift to them, a piece of the magic he had known as a boy in the German forests. But the traditions didn't stop with the tree. Think about the sound of a quill on a card. In this era, the first Christmas cards began to appear. Victoria and Albert loved the idea of sending a physical token of affection to their friends and family. Imagine the scratch, scratch, scratch of the pen across the cardstock. The rhythmic movement of the blotter pressing down on the wet ink. And then, there was the music. Albert brought the carols of his homeland. Still Nacht. Silent Night. Imagine him sitting at the organ, the deep, wooden vibration of the pipes shaking the floor beneath his feet. His voice, a warm, steady baritone, rises into the rafters of the chapel. Victoria stands beside him, her voice joining his in a quiet, harmonious blend. These songs were not just music. They were a boring, repetitive, and beautiful comfort. They were a way of saying that despite the changes in the world, despite the industrial smoke and the political strife, the winter would always bring this moment of peace. Think about the ritual of the Christmas dinner. The clink of silver against fine china, a delicate, musical sound. The smell of roasted meats, cloves, and cinnamon. The low, steady murmur of family conversation, where no one is allowed to talk of politics. Victoria and Albert were creating a cult of the family. They were showing their people that the strongest foundation of a nation was the love found within the home. They allowed newspapers to publish illustrations of their family around the tree. These images traveled across the Atlantic into the homes of early American families, who saw the Queen and her prince and decided to bring a tree into their own parlors. As you listen to the description of these winter nights, let your own room become a place of tradition. Feel the warmth of your blankets, like the heat from a great hall fireplace. Let the rhythm of the carols in your mind lead you into a state of deep, rhythmic calm. There is a profound peace in repetition. The knowing that next year, and the year after, the tree will be cut, the candles will be lit, and the songs will be sung. But love wasn't just for Christmas. Think about the tradition of the birthday table. On every family birthday, Albert would arrange a Gebentisch, a table of gifts. Not just expensive jewels, but things of meaning. A sketch he had drawn. A book he had bound himself. A collection of dried flowers from their last walk at Osborne. Listen to the sound of the wrapping paper being torn, a crisp, sharp, rhythmic sound. The gasps of delight. The quiet, thank you, whispered between husband and wife. These traditions were the threads that bound them together. They were the ways they protected their private world from the public eye. Inside the circle of the candlelight, they were safe. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness of the winter night outside your window. The world is cold, the wind is biting, but inside, everything is golden. The candles on the tree are burning low now. The wax is dripping slowly, forming small, white stalactites on the green needles. The fire in the grate has settled into a bed of glowing coals, pulsing with a deep, red light. The children have been tucked into their beds, their rooms smelling of peppermint and wood smoke. Victoria and Albert are left alone in the quiet of the drawing room. They are sitting on the sofa, her hand in his. The only sound is the rhythmic, hollow, tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hallway. It is the sound of a tradition that will outlive them both. You are safe. You are at rest. The traditions of the night are holding you. The ritual of sleep is beginning. Let the image of the glowing tree fade into a soft, golden blur. Let the scent of pine lead you into the deep forest of your dreams. Sleep now, and dream of flickering candles, of songs sung in the dark, and of the quiet, enduring power of a home built on love. The palace is still, the snow is falling silently over the towers of Windsor, and the traditions are complete. The warmth of the Christmas candles has slowly faded into the soft, gray light of a new decade, the 1850s. The world is changing faster than ever before, but inside the quiet rooms of the palace, a new kind of magic is taking hold. It is the magic of capturing a moment, of freezing time itself within a frame. This is the story of the silhouette, and the birth of a new era of memory. In this chapter, we explore the fascination that Victoria and Albert shared for the image. From the delicate, hand-cut shadows of their youth to the chemical wonder of the very first photographs, they were obsessed with seeing themselves, and their children, through the lens of history. Close your eyes, and imagine the sound of a pair of silver scissors, moving through thick, black paper. Snip, snip, snip. It is a tiny, rhythmic sound. A steady hand moves the paper against the blade, tracing the curve of a nose, the slope of a shoulder, the intricate lace of a collar. Before the camera, this was the silhouette. A shadow cast on a wall, traced, and cut away to reveal the truth of a person's profile. It was a boring, meditative art form. No color, no eyes, just the pure, dark outline of a soul. Victoria and Albert loved these shadows. They had hundreds of them made. Think about the silence of the room as the artist worked. The subject sitting perfectly still, the only light coming from a single candle to cast the perfect shadow. Breathe in, breathe out. The stillness is part of the art. But then, something revolutionary arrived. The daguerreotype. Photography. Imagine the smell of a photography studio in the 1850s. It doesn't smell like lavender or pine. It smells of chemicals, of iodine, of silver, and of the sharp, metallic scent of a world becoming modern. Albert was fascinated by the science of it. He loved the idea that light itself could be used to paint a picture. He spent hours talking to the early pioneers of the craft, discussing exposure times and chemical baths with the same intensity he gave to state treaties. Listen to the atmosphere of a royal photo session. It is not like the photos we take today. There is no clicking sound of a digital shutter. Instead, there is a heavy wooden box on a tripod. A thick black cloth draped over the photographer's head. And then, the long, agonizing silence. Because the film was so slow. Victoria and Albert had to stand perfectly still for nearly a minute. Think about the physical effort of that stillness. The way your muscles begin to twitch. The way your eyes dry out because you cannot blink. The world around you continues to move, the dust motes dance in the light, the wind rustles the curtains, but you must be as still as a statue. This stillness brought a new kind of gravity to their images. When you look at their early photos, you don't see quick, forced smiles. You see a deep, quiet presence. You see the weight of their thoughts, the depth of their partnership, captured in the silver-gray tones of the plate. They were the first monarchs to be truly seen by their people. Not through a painter's flattering brush, but through the honest, unforgiving eye of the camera. Think about the sound of the glass plates being handled. A soft, musical clink as they are slid into their wooden holders. The sloshing of the chemicals in the darkroom, a rhythmic, liquid sound that slowly reveals the image. It's a boring, slow process, but the result is a miracle. They didn't just take formal portraits. They captured their children. Imagine a photo of the young princes and princesses. They are blurred at the edges because children can never be truly still. Those blurs are the ghosts of their laughter, the echoes of their restlessness. For Victoria, these photos were treasures. She would paste them into thick, leather-bound albums, her pen scratching out the dates and names beneath each one. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound of memory being organized. Photography became their private language. When Albert was away, he would send Victoria a photo of himself. She would carry it in a locket, feeling the cool metal against her skin, knowing that this was exactly how he looked in a specific second of time. It was the art of the silhouette evolved into the art of the truth. As you listen to the description of these early images, let your own mind become a darkroom. Imagine the details of your life being slowly revealed, one by one. Feel the stillness in your limbs, as if you were sitting for your own portrait in the light of a high window. There is a profound peace in being still, in allowing the world to move around you while you remain centered. Think about the albums. Rows upon rows of them on the palace shelves. They are the silent witnesses to their life together. The way Victoria's hair changed, the way the lines around Albert's eyes deepened with the stress of the Great Exhibition. The way the children grew, inch by inch, plate by plate. These photos are the anchors of our history. They allow us to reach back across the centuries and look directly into their eyes. Take a deep breath. Imagine the cool, glass surface of an old photograph. Feel the weight of the history it holds. The world of the 1850s is long gone, but the light that hit Albert's face that day is still here, trapped in the silver. The studio is quiet now. The chemicals have been poured away. The heavy wooden camera has been covered with its cloth. The Queen and her prince have returned to their desks, leaving their shadows behind for us to find. Listen to the silence of the room where the albums are kept. It is a deep, respectful silence. The only sound is the rhythmic, hollow, tick-tock of the clock, marking the time that the photos tried so hard to stop. You are safe. You are at rest. The moments of your day are now part of your own album of memories. You can let them go now. Let the image of the silver plate fade into a soft, gray mist. Let the stillness of the portrait lead you into the stillness of sleep. Sleep now, and dream of light and shadow, of moments frozen in time, and of the quiet, enduring beauty of a life captured with love. The chemical scent of the photography studio has drifted away, and the palace has settled into the deep, indigo shadows of the evening. We find ourselves back in the sanctuary of the desks, but tonight, the work feels different. It is the late 1850s, and the partnership between Victoria and Albert has matured into something far deeper than a marriage. It has become an intellectual engine, a quiet, shared brain that is rewriting the rules of how a country is governed. In this chapter, we go beyond the public ceremonies and the family portraits. We enter the space where thoughts are born. This is the story of the intellectual partnership, the hours spent in the dim candlelight, where two people sought to turn an ancient monarchy into a force for modern good. Close your eyes, and imagine the sound of a heavy, leather-bound book being closed. A soft, hollow thud, followed by the rhythmic rustle of silk as Victoria leans back in her chair, and the creak of the floorboards as Albert walks slowly toward the fireplace. In these late hours, the palace is at its most peaceful. The servants have retired, the children are deep in their dreams, and the only living things in the room are the two of them and the fire. Listen to the fire. It isn't a roaring blaze tonight. It is a bed of glowing embers, pulsing with a soft, orange light. Every few minutes, there is a tiny, musical pop as a piece of wood shifts. It is a boring, hypnotic sound that sets the pace for their thoughts. Victoria often said that Albert was her tutor, her minister, and her conscience. Think about the dynamic between them. Victoria brought the fire, the emotion, the deep, ancestral instinct of a queen. Albert brought the cool, German logic, the scientific curiosity, and the relentless desire for order. Together, they were a perfect machine. Imagine them discussing a new piece of legislation. Perhaps it is a law about the working conditions in the northern factories, or the expansion of the railways. Albert reads the dry, boring statistics, his voice a low, steady murmur in the room. He explains the complexities of the economy, the way the steam engine is changing the very soul of the landscape. Victoria listens, her eyes fixed on him. She asks questions, sharp, practical questions that get to the heart of how this will affect her people. The sound of their conversation is like a slow-moving river. It doesn't rush. It flows steadily, carving its way through the difficult problems of the age. They were the first to understand that for a monarchy to survive in a modern world, it had to be useful. It had to be about more than just crowns and parades. It had to be about progress. Think about the letters they wrote together. Imagine the sound of the ink drying on the page. Albert would draft a response to a foreign minister, his hand moving in that precise, disciplined rhythm. Then he would hand the paper to Victoria. She would read it, perhaps change a word, perhaps add a sentence that brought a human touch to the cold, political language. Scratch, scratch, scratch. 2 pens, 1 mind. This was the labor of their love. It wasn't always romantic in the traditional sense. Often, it was boring. It was hours of reading reports, hours of debate, hours of checking and rechecking the details. But in that shared work, they found a closeness that few marriages ever reach. They were building the Victorian era, not with swords, but with quills. Take a deep breath. Imagine the cool, academic air of this study. It feels safe. It feels like a place where things make sense. Albert pushed Victoria to grow. He introduced her to the works of the great thinkers, the scientists, the social reformers. He encouraged her to see herself not just as a ruler, but as a leader of an intellectual age. And Victoria gave Albert a purpose. She gave him a stage upon which to play his great symphony of progress. Listen to the silence that falls between them after a long discussion. It is a comfortable silence. It is the silence of two people who no longer need words to understand one another. Victoria watches him as he stares into the fire, his face etched with the exhaustion of his tireless work. She knows the toll this takes on him. She knows that his mind never truly rests. She walks over to him, her hand resting on his shoulder. A silent, steady, heavy touch. "It is late, Albert," she whispers. "There is so much more to do, Victoria," he replies. His voice is tired, but it carries the rhythm of a man who cannot stop. He is the architect of progress, and the blueprint is never finished. As you listen to the story of this partnership, let your own mind settle into a state of quiet, intellectual order. Imagine your thoughts as books being neatly arranged on a shelf. Feel the calm, steady power of a mind that seeks to understand the world. There is a profound peace in the pursuit of knowledge, in the realization that we are part of a larger story of progress and change. The candles in the study are burning low now. The wax has pulled into white, frozen lakes at the base of the silver holders. The light is dim, a soft, golden brown that highlights the spines of the books on the walls. Albert closes the last folder of the night. The sound of the ribbon being tied around the documents is a crisp, final snap. Another day's work is complete. They stand together by the window, looking out over the dark, sleeping city of London. The gas lamps in the streets are tiny, flickering points of light in the mist. Below them, millions of people are dreaming, unaware of the two people who have spent their night trying to make those dreams safer. Take a deep breath. Feel the support of your bed, like the solid, steady foundation of an empire. Let the rhythmic sound of the ticking clock lead you into a deep, thoughtful state of sleep. You are safe. You are at rest. The partnership is holding the world in balance, and now it is time for the partners to rest. Sleep now, and dream of shared visions, of quiet rooms filled with books, and of the profound peace that comes from a mind that has found its match. The palace is still, the fire is dying. The golden glow of the intellectual partnership is beginning to dim, and the vibrant energy of the great exhibition feels like a distant, shimmering memory. We have reached the year 1861. The air in London is heavy, damp, and cold, a persistent, grey mist that seems to seep through the very stones of the palace walls. In this chapter, we witness the silent toll of a life lived for others. We follow Prince Albert as he moves through the long, drafty corridors, a man who has given every ounce of his spirit to the service of a crown that was never his own. This is the story of the shadow of exhaustion, and the quiet, rhythmic slowing of a heart that has worked too hard, for too long. Close your eyes, and listen to the sound of the rain. It is a steady, boring drumbeat against the tall windows of Windsor Castle. Patter, patter, patter. It is a relentless sound, a sound that tells of wet earth and cold, wintering trees. Inside, the rooms are grand, but they are filled with the scent of damp coal smoke and the cold, metallic smell of the November air. Albert is at his desk. But he is not working with the same sharp, disciplined energy we remember. Listen to the sound of his breathing. It is shallow, slightly labored. He pauses more often now, his pen hovering over the parchment. The scratch, scratch, scratch of the quill is slower, less certain. He is only 42 years old. But in his eyes, there is the weariness of a century. For 21 years, he has been the unofficial private secretary to the Queen, the father of 9 children, the director of the Great Exhibition, and the architect of a new kind of monarchy. He never learned how to rest. He believed that to be idle was to be immoral. And now, his body is finally beginning to protest. Think about the physical sensations of exhaustion. The way your limbs feel heavy, as if they were made of lead. The way a simple flight of stairs feels like a mountain. The way the candlelight seems too bright, making your head throb with a dull, rhythmic ache. Albert is cold. No matter how high the servants pile the logs in the fireplace, he cannot find warmth. He wraps his heavy wool cloak tighter around his shoulders, but the chill is not in the room. It is inside him. Take a deep breath. Feel the coldness of that English winter in your imagination. It is a stillness that doesn't bring peace, but a sense of waiting. Despite his failing health, the work does not stop. There is a crisis in America, the threat of a war that could involve Britain. Albert spends his nights drafting a memo to the Foreign Office, his mind still seeking the path of peace, even as his body seeks the path of sleep. Imagine the scratch of that final, famous memo. His handwriting is shaky now, the ink bleeding slightly into the paper. He is tempering the harsh language of the ministers, trying to prevent a conflict he knows the world cannot afford. This was his final act for the country he loved, and it was done in the deepest shadows of his exhaustion. Victoria watches him from the doorway. She sees the slump of his shoulders, the paleness of his skin, the way he rubs his eyes as if trying to clear a fog. She is worried, but she doesn't yet know the depth of the danger. She believes her dear Albert is simply tired, as he has been so many times before. "Come to bed, Albert," she says, her voice soft with a desperate kind of hope. "I must finish this first, Victoria," he replies, his voice a dry, papery whisper. Listen to the silence that follows. It is a heavy silence, filled with the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the mantel. Tick, tick, tick. Each second is a grain of sand falling through the glass. In late November, Albert travels to Cambridge. It is raining, a cold, driving rain that turns the roads into rivers of mud. He is there to see their eldest son, Bertie, to deal with a family matter that has caused him great distress. Think of the journey back. The rhythmic jolting of the carriage, the dampness of the upholstery, the sound of the horses' hoofs splashing through the puddles. Albert sits in the corner, his eyes closed, his face gray in the dim light of the carriage lamp. Every jolt is a needle of pain in his joints. He is shivering, a deep, uncontrollable tremble that shakes his entire frame. When he returns to Windsor, he can barely walk. The palace settles into a state of hushed anxiety. The servants move on tiptoe. The children are told to be quiet. The nursery songs are replaced by the low, murmuring voices of the doctors in the hallway. Imagine the atmosphere in Albert's bedroom, the blue room. The curtains are drawn, blocking out the gray, boring daylight. The air smells of medicinal spirits, vinegar, and the faint, sweet scent of dying flowers. Albert is lying in the great, four-poster bed. The same bed where he once dreamed of the future. Now, his dreams are fractured, filled with the sounds of the machinery from the Great Exhibition and the wind through the Coburg forests. Listen to the stillness of the room. It is a profound, expectant stillness. The only sound is the rhythmic, heavy breathing of the man in the bed. In and out. In and out. Victoria sits by his side. She holds his hand, the hand that once guided her pen, the hand that once led her in the waltz. It is thin now, the skin like parchment, but it is still the hand she loves more than any other. She reads to him, her voice a low, soothing rhythm, like a river flowing through a parched landscape. She reads from the books they shared, the poems they loved. She is trying to pull him back from the shadows, but the shadows are long, and they are patient. As you listen to the story of this exhaustion, let your own body find the rest that Albert could not. Imagine the weight of your day as a heavy burden that you are now setting down. Feel the warmth of your room, a warmth that Albert longed for. There is a peace in knowing that the work is finished. Even if we are tired, we can rest knowing we have given what we could. The lights in the castle are dimming. The rain has stopped, leaving only a quiet, dripping sound from the eaves. The empire is waiting, the world is waiting, but here, in this room, time has slowed to a crawl. Albert looks at Victoria, his eyes briefly clearing. He smiles, a small, tired smile that speaks of 21 years of shared labor. "Good, little wife," he whispers. The shadow has grown long now. The exhaustion has taken hold. But even in the darkness, there is the memory of the light. Take a deep breath. Feel the support of your bed, solid and secure. Let the rhythmic breathing of the palace lead you into a deep, restorative state of sleep. You are safe. You are at rest. The labor of the day is over, and the quiet of the night is here to heal you. Sleep now, and dream of quiet forests, of work well done, and of the profound peace that comes when the spirit finally lets go of the world. The castle is still, the wind has died down, and the shadow of exhaustion is turning into the peace of the night. The shadow of exhaustion has finally lengthened into the deep, still evening of December 14th, 1861. We find ourselves within the most private sanctuary of Windsor Castle, the Blue Room. Outside, the winter air is biting and cold, but here, inside these four walls, time has slowed to a rhythmic, agonizing crawl. This is the story of the final hours of a partnership that defined an age, and the quiet, hallowed silence of a room where a soul prepares to return to the stars. In this chapter, we step away from the empire, away from the politics, and away from the progress. We are here to witness the most human moment of all. The goodbye. Close your eyes, and listen to the silence of the Blue Room. It is a heavy, velvet silence, broken only by the rhythmic, hollow, tick, tick, tick of the French clock on the mantelpiece. It is the same clock that once measured the hours of their shared work, but tonight, each tick feels like a heartbeat fading into the distance. The air in the room is thick, smelling of lavender water, the sharp, clean scent of medicinal ether, and the faint, earthy aroma of the dying fire. The light is dim, filtered through the heavy, blue silk curtains that give the room its name. Everything is bathed in a soft, indigo shadow, a color that feels like the very edge of the night. Albert is lying in the great mahogany bed. He looks so small beneath the heavy covers. His face, once so full of the light of reason and the fire of progress, is now pale as marble, his features smoothed by the coming peace. Listen to the sound of his breathing. It is the only other sound in the room. In and out. A soft, rattling whisper that marks the passage of his final journey. Victoria is sitting by his side. She has not left this spot for hours. Think about the physical sensation of her presence. Her hand, small and warm, is wrapped around Albert's cold fingers. She is leaning forward, her face close to his, as if she could breathe her own vibrant life back into his tired lungs. "It is Victoria, your own little wife," she whispers into the stillness. Think of the weight of those words. In this room, she isn't the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland. She isn't the Empress of the Seas. She is just a woman, holding on to the man who has been her world for 21 years. Every now and then, Albert's eyes open. They are clouded, wandering through the memories of a lifetime. Perhaps he sees the dark pines of the Thuringian forest. Perhaps he hears the rhythmic clanging of the machinery in the Crystal Palace. Perhaps he is back in the ballroom, feeling the 1-2-3 rhythm of that first, awkward waltz. But then, his gaze finds Victoria. And for a brief, beautiful second, the clouds part. He recognizes her. A small, ghost of a smile touches his lips. "Gutes Frauchen," he murmurs. "Good, little wife." Take a deep breath. Feel the profound, boring, and beautiful stillness of this moment. There is no tragedy here, only the quiet completion of a cycle. The doctors move in the shadows. Their footsteps are silent on the thick carpets. They whisper to one another in the corner, their voices like the rustle of dry leaves. They know there is nothing more to be done. The science that Albert loved so much has reached its limit. The rest is left to the heart. Outside, the wind has died down. The night is perfectly still. The moon is hanging over the long walk, casting a cold, silver light over the frost-covered trees. The world is waiting. 1,000,000 people are sleeping, unaware that the man who shaped their lives is slipping away in a blue room. Inside the room, the fire has settled into a bed of deep red embers. They pulse with a slow, rhythmic light, like a heart that is refusing to let go. A single spark flies up the chimney, a tiny, golden firefly that vanishes into the dark. Listen to the clock again. Tick, tick, tick. Victoria begins to sing. It is a low, trembling melody. A German hymn that Albert loved. Her voice is a soft, melodic thread in the silence, a bridge of sound meant to guide him across. Rock of Ages, cleft for me. As the night moves toward its deepest hour, the breathing in the bed changes. It becomes slower, more rhythmic, more peaceful. The struggle is over. The exhaustion has been replaced by a quiet, expectant grace. Albert's hand twitches in hers. He is letting go. Think about the silence that follows the final breath. It is a silence so deep it feels like it has weight. It is the silence of history stopping for a moment. The clock continues to tick. The fire continues to glow. But the world is different now. Victoria doesn't scream. She doesn't wail. She leans down and kisses his forehead, her tears falling silently onto the cold, marble skin. She stays there for a long time, her head resting on his chest, listening to the silence where a heart used to be. The blue room has become a cathedral. The blue silk curtains, the golden mantel clock, the mahogany bed, they are no longer just furniture. They are the silent witnesses to the end of an era. As you listen to the description of this final hour, let your own mind find its place of deepest rest. Imagine the blue room not as a place of sadness, but as a place of absolute peace. A place where all the work, all the stress, and all the noise of the world finally comes to an end. There is a profound beauty in a life well lived. In a partnership that gave everything it had to the light. The candles in the room are burning low. The wax has formed small, white sculptures around the base of the silver sticks. The light is soft, almost divine, as the first hint of the winter dawn begins to touch the edges of the curtains. The era of Victoria and Albert, the two desks, the crystal palace, the nursery songs, it has all been gathered into this one, quiet room. Take a deep breath. Feel the security of your own room, the warmth of your own bed. You are safe. You are at rest. The story is not over, but the partnership has found its eternal peace. Let the image of the blue room fade into a soft, indigo mist. Let the rhythmic ticking of the clock lead you into a deep, restorative sleep. Sleep now, and dream of quiet halls, of reunions in the light, and of the profound peace that comes when the soul finally finds its sanctuary. The castle is still, the night is done, and the blue room is held in the gentle embrace of eternity. The final breath in the blue room has been drawn, and the world has woken up to a morning that feels colder, darker, and infinitely more silent. It is the dawn of December 15th, 1861. The bells of London are beginning to toll, a deep, heavy, rhythmic iron sound that rolls across the mist of the Thames. But inside the heart of the Queen, a different kind of silence has taken root. A silence that will last for 40 years. In this chapter, we enter the long night of mourning. We follow Victoria as she retreats from the light of the world, wrapping herself in the heavy, black silk of widowhood. This is the story of a woman who turned her grief into a ritual, and her palace into a living monument to the man she lost. Close your eyes, and imagine the sound of black silk. It is not the light, joyous rustle of the white wedding satin. It is a heavy, dry, whispering sound. It is the sound of a queen moving through darkened hallways where the mirrors have been covered in black crepe. For Victoria, the world had stopped. She felt that her life as a woman had ended in that blue room, and only the cold, mechanical duty of a sovereign remained. She made a vow. She would keep Albert's memory alive as if he had never left her side. Think about the physical rituals of this morning. Every single morning, for 4 decades, a servant would enter Albert's dressing room at Windsor. Listen to the sounds of that room. The rhythmic, metallic splash of warm water being poured into a porcelain basin. The clink of a silver shaving mug against the marble tabletop. The soft, papery sound of a fresh set of clothes being laid out on the bed. Albert was gone, but his water was still poured. His clothes were still brushed. His watch was still wound. It was a boring, repetitive, and deeply comforting cycle of grief. It was a way of pretending that time had no power over love. Take a deep breath, and feel the stillness of that room. The scent of his soap, the coldness of the unused bed, the heavy silence of the untouched books on his desk. Victoria began to wear black every day. Jet jewelry, black lace, and the iconic white widow's cap. She became the Widow of Windsor. Imagine her sitting at the 2 desks, but now one desk is empty. The silence of that empty desk was louder than any shout. She would sit there for hours, her pen scratching out letters on black-bordered stationery. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The ink was black, the paper was bordered in black, even the wax used to seal the envelopes was black. She was a ghost living in a world of ghosts. She retreated to Osborne, to the domestic sanctuary they had built together. But the laughter in the nurseries was quieter now. The children grew up in the shadow of a father who had become a saint in their mother's eyes. Listen to the sound of her footsteps on the gravel paths of Osborne. Crunch, crunch, crunch. She walked the same paths they had walked together, her hand often reaching out to touch the air beside her, as if she could feel the phantom pressure of his arm. She built monuments. The Albert Memorial in Kensington Gardens, a towering forest of gold and stone. The Royal Mausoleum at Frogmore, a silent, marble cathedral for their eternal rest. Think about the sound of the sculptor's chisel. Chink, chink, chink. A rhythmic, cold sound, turning hard stone into the soft likeness of a sleeping prince. Victoria spent hours overseeing every detail, ensuring that the marble captured the exact curve of his brow, the exact strength of his hand. She was preserving him in stone because she could not keep him in flesh. For many years, the people of England did not see their queen. They began to grumble. They called her invisible. They wondered if the monarchy still had a purpose without a visible heart. But Victoria didn't care for the noise of the public. She was listening to the silence of the Blue Room. She found a strange comfort in the boring aspects of her sorrow. The sorting of his letters. The cataloguing of his speeches. The writing of her leaves from the journal of our life in the Highlands. As you listen to the description of these long, dark years, let your own mind find a sense of quiet closure. Imagine your worries as black threads being woven into a great, soft tapestry of history. Feel the weight of the silence around you, not as a burden, but as a protective blanket. There is a peace that comes from a long, sustained memory. A realization that love does not end when the breathing stops. But even in the long night, a small light began to return. Slowly, very slowly, Victoria began to emerge. She realized that Albert would not have wanted her to hide. He would have wanted the architect of progress to continue his work. She began to appear at openings, at jubilees, at the ceremonies of her vast, growing empire. She was still in black. She was still mourning. But she was moving. Think about the sound of her carriage in the Golden Jubilee of 1887. The roar of millions of voices, a sound like a great, crashing ocean. Victoria sat in her open carriage, a small, stout woman in black, looking out at a world that had changed beyond recognition since 1837. She saw the telephones, the electric lights, the motor cars. All the things Albert had dreamed of in the Crystal Palace had come true. She felt his presence in every wire, every engine, every bridge. The night of mourning was not a waste. It was a long, slow transition from a partnership of two to a partnership of one woman and a memory. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness of your own night. The world is dark, the day is done, but the memories of your life are still there, glowing like embers in the dark. The palace at Windsor is settling for the night. The servants have finished their rituals. Albert's water has been poured for the last time today. Victoria is in her bed, her hand resting on the pillow next to hers, where his head once lay. The only sound is the rhythmic, hollow, tick-tock of the clock. It has ticked through 40 years of silence, and it will tick until the dawn. You are safe. You are at rest. The long night is peaceful, and the memories are kind. Let the image of the black silk fade into a soft, velvety darkness. Let the rhythm of the tolling bells lead you into a deep, restorative sleep. Sleep now, and dream of bridges made of light, of reunions in the mist, and of the quiet, enduring power of a love that never said goodbye. The palace is still, the widow is at peace, and the long night of mourning is held in the gentle embrace of the stars. The deep, solitary silence of the morning years has begun to shift, not into a loud celebration, but into a vast, quiet expansion. We have reached the final decades of the 19th century. The world is a web of steamships, telegraph wires, and steel rails, and at the center of this web sits a small woman in a black silk dress. Victoria. But she is no longer just the widow of Windsor. She has become the matriarch of a continent, the grandmother of Europe. In this chapter, we see the harvest of the seeds that Victoria and Albert planted in their busy nurseries decades ago. We follow their 9 children and 42 grandchildren as they travel across borders, carrying the blood of Coburg and the spirit of Windsor into the palaces of Germany, Russia, Spain, and Greece. This is the story of a family that became a map, and the quiet, rhythmic influence of a grandmother who ruled from her writing desk. Close your eyes, and imagine the sound of a large, heavy map being unrolled on a mahogany table. The dry, papery crackle of the parchment. The way the edges curl back, wanting to return to their dark, rolled-up sleep. Victoria sits at the table, her spectacles perched on her nose, her finger tracing the lines that connect London to Berlin, to St. Petersburg, to Madrid. Every line is a marriage. Every marriage is a bridge. Albert had dreamed of this. He believed that if their children occupied the thrones of Europe, the continent would be held together by the bonds of family rather than the steel of bayonets. He saw a future where cousins would not go to war against cousins. And even though he is gone, Victoria is determined to fulfill his vision. Listen to the atmosphere of the Queen's mourning. The scratch, scratch, scratch of her pen as she writes to her daughters and granddaughters. She is not just sending grandmotherly advice. She is managing a continent. My dear Vicky, she writes to her eldest daughter, now the Empress of Germany. You must be careful, you must be firm, you must remember what your father always said. Think about the physical weight of this correspondence. Thousands of letters traveling across Europe in leather mailbags. The rhythmic thumping of the steam engines on the trains, the splashing of the paddle wheels on the Channel ferries. Each letter carries the scent of Victoria's stationery, and the heavy, boring, beautiful weight of her expectations. The world is changing, but Victoria remains the fixed point. Imagine a summer afternoon at Balmoral in Scotland. The air is sharp with the scent of pine and heather. The purple mountains are draped in a soft, grey mist. The castle is filled with the sounds of a family reunion. Listen to the voices. A mix of English, German, and Russian accents, all blending in the drawing room. The high-pitched laughter of great-grandchildren playing on the lawn, their voices carrying in the thin, Highland air. The clink, clink, clink of the silver tea service. The soft, rhythmic rustle of silk gowns as the princesses walk through the heather. They are all her children. The future Tsar of Russia, the future Kaiser of Germany, the future kings and queens of nations yet to face the storms of the new century. To the world, they are icons of power. To Victoria, they are simply the children, and they must be taught their duty. There is a profound peace in this continuity. The feeling that life is a long, slow river, and that we are merely vessels carrying the water from the past into the future. Victoria sits in her donkey carriage, watching them. She is a small figure, but her presence is immense. She is the anchor. When she speaks, the room falls silent. Not because she is a queen, but because she is the grandmother. She is the one who remembers the old world, the world before the telegram, the world where Albert walked beside her. Take a deep breath. Feel the cool, Scottish air in your lungs. Imagine the steady, rhythmic pulse of this vast family tree, its roots deep in the soil of the past, its branches reaching out toward a horizon they cannot yet see. The grandmother of Europe era was a time of perceived stability. A time when the world felt like a well-ordered house, governed by the rules of the Victorian parlor. It was a boring, predictable, and comforting world for those within the circle. Victoria found a new kind of joy in her grandchildren. She was softer with them than she had been with her own children. She would sit them on her lap, letting them play with the heavy gold lockets around her neck. Inside those lockets were the photos of Albert. She was introducing the new generation to the man who had started it all. Listen to the sound of a nursery in the late 1890s. The ticking of the clock. The soft breathing of the great-grandchildren. The world outside is roaring with the arrival of the 20th century, but here, under the grandmother's gaze, time is still measured by the afternoon tea and the evening prayer. But there is a subtle sadness in the map, too. Victoria knows that she cannot control the hearts of the nations as easily as she controls the marriages of her children. She sees the tensions rising in the east, the pride growing in the west. She sees the cousins beginning to whisper about armies and empires. She writes more fervently. She uses her influence to settle disputes, to calm tempers, to keep the peace for just one more year. We are a family, her letters seem to scream. We must remain a family. As you listen to the story of this matriarch, let your own mind find its sense of belonging. Imagine your own lineage, the people who came before you, the people who will come after. Feel the calm, steady power of being a link in an eternal chain. There is a profound rest in the realization that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. The sun is setting over the hills of Balmoral. The sky is a deep, bruised purple, and the first stars are beginning to blink in the cold Highland sky. The family reunions are ending. The carriages are being ready to take the princes and princesses back to their distant capitals. The sound of the wheels on the gravel. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The waving of handkerchiefs in the twilight. Victoria is left alone on the terrace. The house is quiet now. The laughter has faded, leaving only the scent of pine and the sound of the wind through the glen. She goes back to her desk. She picks up her pen. The scratch, scratch, scratch resumes. She is tired, her hands are stiff with age, but her purpose is unwavering. She is the grandmother of Europe, and the night is long, and there are still so many letters to write. Take a deep breath. Feel the support of your bed, as solid as the foundations of a castle. Let the rhythmic sound of the scratching pen lead you into a state of deep, historical calm. You are safe. You are at rest. The map of the world is being watched over, and for tonight, the family is at peace. Let the image of the sprawling family tree fade into a soft, green mist. Let the quiet influence of the grandmother lead you into a deep, restorative sleep. Sleep now, and dream of distant palaces, of bridges built with love, and of the quiet, enduring strength of a heart that holds a continent together. The palace is still, the map is folded, and the grandmother of Europe is held in the gentle embrace of the night. The long, winding map of Europe has been folded away for the last time, the thousands of letters have been blotted and sent, and the white widow's cap has become a symbol of a century that is finally drawing to its close. It is January 1901. The world is holding its breath. A cold, silver frost covers the gardens of Osborne House, and the rhythmic pulse of the Victorian era is slowing, settling, finding its final, quiet cadence. In this final chapter, we reach the end of the long night. We follow the Queen as she prepares for her greatest journey, the one she has been waiting for since that cold December night in 1861. This is the story of the reunion, the closing of the circle, and the eternal peace of two hearts reunited in stone. Close your eyes, and listen to the winter at Osborne. It is not the vibrant, salt-scented summer of their family years. It is a fragile, crystalline winter. The sound of the wind through the bare branches of the trees Albert planted is a soft, hollow, whistling sound. The sea, the eternal sea, continues its boring, rhythmic wash against the shore. Shh, wash. Shh, wash. Inside the house, the air is perfectly still. It smells of the wood smoke from the banked fires, and the faint, sweet scent of the white lilies that fill the hallways. The rooms are hushed, the heavy curtains drawn to create a world of soft, golden twilight. Victoria is 81 years old. She is lying in her bed, the same bed where she found sanctuary so many times before. She is tired. Not the sharp exhaustion of work, but the deep, peaceful tiredness of a soul that has finished its task. Think about the physical stillness of this room. The only sound is the rhythmic, slow ticking of the clock. Tick, tick, tick. It is the heartbeat of a century. Her children and grandchildren are gathered in the hallways. Their voices are low, murmuring like a distant stream. They are the monarchs of the future, but in this house, they are just a family saying goodbye to their anchor. Victoria's mind is no longer on the empire. She is traveling back. She hears the sound of a waltz, faint and melodic, drifting from the ballroom of her memory. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. She feels the pressure of a steady hand on her waist. She sees the light of the crystal palace reflecting in Albert's eyes. She smells the pine needles of the first Christmas tree. Albert, she whispers, her voice a thin, papery thread in the silence. She has carried his memory like a heavy, beautiful cloak for 40 years. She has kept his room exactly as he left it. She has talked to his portrait every night. And now, the distance between them is vanishing, like mist burning off under a morning sun. Take a deep breath. Feel the profound, boring, and holy peace of this transition. There is no fear here. There is only the sense of a door finally being unlocked. On the evening of January 22nd, the breathing stops. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full. It is the silence of a life complete. The world outside begins its mourning. The bells of London toll again, but this time, they are joined by the bells of the world. From the snowy towers of St. Petersburg to the sun-drenched churches of the Mediterranean, the iron rhythm of grief spreads across the earth. But let's leave the noise of the world, and follow the Queen back to Windsor. Imagine the funeral procession. It is not a black funeral. Victoria requested white. She wanted to be buried as a soldier's daughter and a bride. The white horses, the white pall, the white flowers. It is a vision of purity, a return to the symbolism of the white dress. The carriage moves slowly through the streets, the rhythmic clatter of hooves on the cold ground. Clip-clop, clip-clop, clip-clop. Thousands of people stand in absolute silence, their breath forming small clouds in the winter air. They are watching the passing of an age. They reach Frogmore, the royal mausoleum. Think about the atmosphere of this place. It is a cathedral of marble and gold, tucked away in a quiet corner of the Windsor Gardens. The air inside is cool, still, and smells of incense and ancient stone. In the center of the mausoleum sits the great sarcophagus. On top of it, for 40 years, has lain the marble figure of Prince Albert. He is captured in his youth, his hands folded, his face peaceful. Beside him, there has always been an empty space. A space carved out of the same solid block of granite. Listen to the sound of the stone being moved. A heavy, grinding, rhythmic sound. The space is ready. Victoria is laid to rest beside him. The two figures in stone are now complete. Side by side, just as they sat at their desks. Side by side, just as they danced in the ballroom. The inscription above them is one Albert chose long ago. Farewell, well-beloved. Here at last I shall rest with thee in Christ I shall rise again. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of the marble in your imagination. It is solid. It is permanent. It is the end of the long night of mourning. The doors of the mausoleum are closed. The iron bolt slides home with a final, echoing click. Outside, the winter sun is setting over the long walk. The sky is a pale, translucent violet. The Victorian era has ended, but the partnership remains, etched in the silence of the stone. Think about the stillness of Frogmore tonight. The moonlight filters through the stained glass windows, casting patterns of ruby and sapphire across the marble faces of the Queen and her prince. The world outside continues to rush toward the future, toward the wars and the wonders of the 20th century. But here, time has no power. They are together. The two desks are now one tomb. The Kensington isolation has been replaced by eternal companionship. As you listen to the conclusion of this story, let your own heart find its final place of rest. Imagine the story of your own life as a series of chapters, some loud, some quiet, some difficult, some beautiful. But all of them leading toward a place of peace. There is a profound comfort in a circle that closes. In a journey that returns home. The palace is quiet now. The era is over. The grandmother of Europe is at rest, and the architect of progress has found his partner. Take a deep breath. Feel the warmth and safety of your own bed. The stories of history are long, and they are heavy, but they always end in the silence of the night. You are safe. You are at rest. The history is complete, and the night is yours to keep. Let the image of the marble tomb fade into a soft, white mist. Let the rhythmic sound of the sea lead you into the deepest, most restorative sleep you have ever known. Sleep now, and dream of white silk and golden crowns, of forests and glass palaces, and of the quiet, enduring power of a love that was written in stone. The world is still, the story is done, and Victoria and Albert are finally, eternally, at peace. Good night.